Okay, good evening. Welcome to our city council meetings this evening. Tonight, we'll ask you to bear with us tonight. We do have two other quick meetings we have to do before we notice them to start at 7 o'clock as well, so we've got to get through these really quick, and then we'll get on to our general meeting. So we're going to start with our getting there. We're going to start with the, you want to do CDRA? Is that first? Okay, we'll start with the CDRA meeting, so we'll call that meeting to order. Start with item 1.1, look for a motion for review and outline of the finalization process to approve the minutes of tonight.
Motion to have the minutes of December 11th, 2024 be prepared and distributed to each member of the CDA board. The board will have 10 days to review the minutes and submit any changes to the secretary. If after 10 days there are no changes, the minutes will stand approved. If there are changes, the process will be followed until all changes are made and the board is in agreement.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Steve, second by Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2.1, consideration of a tax increment participation agreement with Elevated Acquisitions for various infrastructure and site improvements associated with the commons at Herriman Towne Center. Blake. Give us 1 second. Hold on, Blake. Do we have sound? Just 1 second. I don't think you're... Green, not red. Now is it working? There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. I know how the on button works now. So this is a new development, our CDRA participation agreement for a new development located at the corner of 13400 South and Mountain View Corridor. This is the project location on the map, as I explained. And so the total area for the town center, which was created several years ago, is almost 377 acres. The area in red highlighted on the map generates property tax increment that we have interlocal agreements with other entities, and that portion of the tax comes to the city, and then we have the opportunity to use it to fund infrastructure or other improvements that support the community development area. We have an existing agreement with HTC Communities, which was just executed not too long ago, to pay back for all the infrastructure improvements that they did for this area. This is the map from that HTC agreement showing the infrastructure improvements. And this agreement that we're proposing tonight would obligate the city to pay back HTC first, and we have some bond payments to pay back first, and then Elevated would be entitled to receive these funds as an incentive for them for their project. And this commons project would increase the amount of tax increment revenue that would be coming into the city by quite a bit by bringing up property values for that area. So these are the infrastructure and other site improvements that are justifying the incentive for these funds. And some of the other items, this allows them to expedite the development of their project, allows them to go out and negotiate with highly desirable tenants and entice them to come to the city as well. And one of the key things it does is it constructs the median landscaping on 13200 South that we just finished, and then with the traffic study that was completed with their development agreement we'll hear about later tonight, they will need to install islands and a traffic signal for their main entrance into the site for safety reasons. And that signal will be timed with UDOT, so it's going to have to, with Mountain View Corridor signal, 134th and Mountain View. So that'll have to follow all the UDOT standards. It's a little bit more costly, but it will allow a 3/4 intersection into the site. So you'll be able to have a left in and a right in, right out. And that'll be the same for the other side of the road into the Riverton apartment complex as well. So the anticipated time frame for these funds from the TIF, or from the CDA to go to elevated with this agreement are, we would anticipate HTC's agreement would be paid out in 2028. There might be a small payment in 2029 and so there'd be excess TIF that year to share with elevated. And then from 2029 to 2031, the full amount of the tax increment coming to the city could be shared, or would be shared with elevated. In 2032, there are bond payments that would need to start, and so they would take the majority of the tax increment until 2034, which there would be some excess in 2034, and then all of the TIF available in 2035 to be shared with elevated. So the proposal on this is a max of 20 years and half of the local option sales tax. Let's see, I don't have that shown. But it would be half of the half. So a quarter of our sales tax that we receive from the site. And that's the other agreement that goes with this. So the TIF is the property tax, and there's two other agreements that we'll hear about in the regular meeting that we'll go over with those, but they all work together to pay back the total incentive for this project. So sorry I got that a little confused there because I've been talking about all these agreements so much today. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We also have representatives from the developer here if you have any questions for them.
Any questions? See none, I'll look for a motion.
Your turn.
2.1.
No, just from some of the offline conversations we've had, so this is a little bit different than some of our discussions. So the half of the 1% maximum of 20 years, or the total incentive amount, whichever comes first.
That's in.
So right now in front of you is the.
This is the TIF. So it runs out at 2035. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself with reading the slide. So this would run out in 2035.
Okay.
This is
This is
simply
just
the
CDR.
TIF,
Okay,
not the.
that's what I was.
Yeah.
That's a
saying.
different
I'm
conversation, yeah.
Looking through this going, I thought these were two different things.
Yep, so this is just a TIF.
All right, then I'll hold that for later. Just by way of explanation for public consumption, right? We actually have some audience members here, which we normally don't. So I know that some of you are here to yell at us about some other things, which is good, right? But, and for anybody who's going to watch these sorts of agreements, the CDA, CDRA, Commercial Development Area, Commercial Redevelopment Area, TIF is tax, tax increment funding, finance. These are financial incentives that we can use to try to get businesses to locate here. So, and rules have changed. Seem to be changing all the time at the state level to dictate what we can do. This area is part of an older agreement that actually has a CDA, CDRA, which allows us to use those property taxes to help put in the infrastructure. So, for example, we're talking about this area, well, actually the city hall is part of this original area, right? So when there was nothing here, there was very little property tax being collected, right? The raw land zoned agricultural didn't produce much property tax for anyone. Nothing produces much property tax for the city itself, but mainly the school district. Please look at your property tax notices. Roughly half of it goes to the school district. Another 25% goes to Salt Lake County, and then the other largest portion goes to public safety, at least in Herriman, right? So fire and police. And then there's a handful of smaller ones, including Herriman City. So when this was put in place years before any of our time, the city had to go out and get those major property tax entities, mainly the school district and Salt Lake County, to agree to give up their portion of that property tax to give to the businesses coming in to help put in the roads, the water, the sewer, et cetera. So instead of getting 100% of very little, they're getting some percentage of something that's much larger for that period of time. Once that time's up, then they collect the full amount. So that's what those things are. The only thing the city has to really bargain with is the thing that we want most, which is sales tax. There's a local option sales tax in Utah, which is 1%. The city in which it originates gets half of that percent. So that's what all of us cities are after, is half of 1% from the store that you buy your goods from. The other 0.5% goes to the state, and they redistribute it based on population. So that's, just by way of explanation, that's what we're talking about. And so we're looking at it the same way. We can get 100% of zero sales tax revenue from that area, or we can agree to get a portion of it and get a portion of it back to them to incentivize them to come here instead of our neighboring city. Hopefully that's a good enough explanation.
Thank you, Jared.
2.1.
Okay, yep.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R 2024-05, approving a tax participation agreement with Elevated Acquisitions LLC.
Second.
Motion by Sherry, second by Steve. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Go to item 2.2, consideration of a tax increment participation agreement with Rosecrest Communities for reimbursement of costs incurred to install infrastructure improvements associated with the Rosecrest development. Blake?
Okay, this one's a little more straightforward. This is the Rosecrest area, which is highlighted here. The Rosecrest CDA, which currently includes RSL, Academy Village, some housing developments, and some of the future Panorama development. So this area is a little bit shy of 300 acres. And this area, the difference with this one is all the infrastructure is done, and there is an existing agreement in place with Rosecrest. But the existing agreement has some terms and things that are a little bit unfinished and not super clear. So this is kind of a restatement, so to say, but it nullifies and replaces entirely the existing agreement and takes the place of it. So these are the infrastructure projects that this agreement is paying for. Like I said, everything is complete. There are no future projects anticipated with this. So this number is solid. All the invoices have been verified. And we have a pending interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County, but there is a section in this participation agreement that says they don't get county funds. So the city's portion that we keep are the county funds. So this interlocal really affects Panorama and the city, not this development so much, but it's worth bringing up here. The reimbursement summary here is shown. There's been some reimbursement done over time, so the obligation's about $23 million, and there's going to be an impact fee reimbursement agreement discussed later in the regular meeting that works in conjunction with this one. That's a total aggregate amount that would be reimbursed, and so it'll be TIF and impact fees. Interesting part about the impact fees are they're restricted funds. These funds are unrestricted, and so one fund can be used to reimburse the other if there's an excess, and there is anticipated to be a slight excess if development occurs as anticipated in this area. So this one cleans up some old issues and creates a new streamlined, clean agreement for this reimbursement. And our analysis, working with Kyle, is that this won't have any problem being reimbursed in the term that's required. And that's it. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them on this one as well.
Any questions, comments on this one? Okay, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve resolution.
Sorry.
Just a comment. I think it would be a good question just for the record for public consumption, as Jared likes to say, as to the reason why we're doing a participation agreement now in 2024 for development that started back in 2007?
I think when was the CDA created? Much of this work especially the east side of Mountain View corridor was more 2017, 2018.
Yeah, 2017, 2018.
The agreement, the original agreement was executed in that time frame, but they had a lot of unanswered questions. A lot of those projects weren't done, or some projects weren't included, and they're entitled to reimbursement for some of those larger infrastructure improvements. And one of the main issues was it wasn't tied with the reimbursement agreement for the impact fees. So now that they're tied together, this cleans everything up. So that's why it's probably more appropriate to have called this amended and restated, but we created a new one and nullified the old one with it.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to get to, is that this is cleaning up and restating some vestiges of some kind of mismatched agreements from the past.
Yep, we have a lot clearer picture now, so
Okay.
a lot easier to write it when you know what's been done.
Yeah. Thank you, Blake. Sorry, Jared.
Okay, go ahead, Jared.
Where was I? Motion to approve resolution R 2024-06, approving a tax participation agreement with Rosecrest Communities.
Motion by Jared,
Second?
second by Sherry. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. The motion carries. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll quickly do our Herriman City Safety Enforcement Area meeting. Start with item 1.1, look for approval of the minutes.
Motion to have the minutes of December 11th, 2024 be prepared and distributed to each member of the HCC board. The board will have 10 days to review the minutes and submit any changes to the secretary. If after 10 days there are no changes, the minutes will stand approved. If there are changes, the process will be followed until all changes are made and the board is in agreement.
Second.
Motion by Sherry, second by Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries. We'll do item 2, public hearing, and consideration of resolution amending the fiscal year 2025 budget. We'll start with Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. This public hearing is to look at amending the budget for the HCSEA, which is a taxing district. Those tax funds are used to contract with Herriman City to provide police services to Herriman. So that's a little background, because I've never had this many people at a public hearing for a budget amendment before. It's quite exciting for me. So overall, the amendment itself is actually fairly simple. The police department would like to hire 2 additional employees. We have discussed this in a work session previously with the property tax increase last year, and then also directives from the Herriman City Council. We have restricted funds that came from both the tax increase, and then we also were setting aside new growth money that comes from property tax to be solely used for growth-related expenses, mainly hiring additional police officers. So as you can see on the slide, the budget amendment is requesting an additional $365,670 to increase the operating expenses for the police department. That mainly is personnel. However, there are operating costs associated with those new officers. And then a $165,100 to purchase 2 vehicles for those 2 officers. And then below it shows a summary of what the current budget is and then what the proposed increase is. And then the adjusted amended amount. To give a summary of the restricted funding, if this is approved by the board, it will leave $124,000 of that restricted new growth money available in the HCSEA fund. Are there any questions for me before the public hearing?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, at this point, we will open the public hearing on this item. See no comment, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any discussion among the council?
I don't really have any discussion, but again, just to kind of restate for the public, we've had many conversations about this in prior meetings, and this is the final step to authorize them to transfer those funds and hire those officers. So this isn't something we're just doing tonight. This is several months of work.
Yeah, and this all came out of all of the preparation that was made as part of the police tax increase that was voted on last year. We made sure those funds were reserved for the appropriate things, not just willy-nilly. We wanted to make sure they were reserved for officers, for making sure that was done in a timely manner. So this is all the outcome of that being done appropriately. So it's good to have 2 more officers.
Yep. Okay, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve Resolution R24-04, approving an amendment to the 2024-25 fiscal year budget.
Motion by Jared, second by Sherry. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Okay, look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, we'll now go to our regular city council meeting this evening. We'll start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance by Ryan Campbell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ryan. We like the best. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.2, City Council comments and recognition. Anything tonight? I'll give a shout out to our staff and everybody, events, everybody involved with the Night of Lights last week. Another packed house over here. Everybody loved the drone show, new this year. Sherry got to ring the bell, ring in Santa. So truly, I think I've just, again, phenomenal. Nothing but positive feedback I've heard everywhere I've been. So thank you for everybody involved with that. So
Thank you for the weatherman for not snowing that day.
Yes.
That's great.
It was really cold last year.
that was
Mother Nature benefited this year.
okay. See no other any comments? We will now go to our public comment. At this point, audience members may bring any item within the city's purview to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@herriman.org or by visiting herriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there's a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. Now, I will say, we normally don't do this. I will say, if there's anybody here to speak to the mine, we've already taken some action tonight. We've heard the concerns. We've had a lot of emails. We've had a lot of comments. We have already directed our city attorney to start looking into our options as a city. We received the notice the same time the residents did. So we are looking into understanding, even ourselves as a city, where this permit is, why it's what it is. I will say our understanding still, even working with the developer, is this is being excavated to build Juniper Crest Road. That we agreed on this MDA last month, finalized the MDA last month, the developer needs to finish that. Their goal is to finish that in the by next fall. And so that is still, they cannot build any homes in that area until that road is completed. They can start building them, they cannot have an occupancy until that road is completed. So it behooves them, it behooves the city for this mine not to be a long-term, if that makes sense. So this caught us off guard because even as a city, kind of caught us off guard. So just please know, and please, we're not trying to discourage your public comments. Please, if you have public comments, we still want to hear them. I'm just letting you know we've already started taking action. We've heard the comments. We've listened to the meeting that, we went through the whole meeting. Our communications went through the meeting, gave us all a summary. So we're already taking action to try to protect our residents' interests, and talk to the gentleman here and express some concerns on behalf of the HOA. So please still comment if you need to, but we're just letting you know we are aware and looking to see what we can do as a city to help our residents. So with that being said, there's still some other comment forms I have tonight. So we'll start with John Applegarth.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. Bear with me, I get a little nervous with the process, but I'm just here to talk to you today about the encroachment, the alleged encroachment issue. A little frustrated in that, I've lived here 24 years. the fence was pre-existing, and now I'm being asked to move that. And from what I can tell, the city is basing the alleged 2 feet encroachment off of the maps produced by the Salt Lake County Assessor's Office from their geographic information system and their GIS system. I spoke today with a man from the county surveyor's office, and he said while the GIS system is important and is helpful in determining the situation, that it is not accurate and precise enough to determine exact property locations. So I guess my concern there is, first of all, is there an encroachment issue? We've met with an initial meeting with an officer who was unable to tell me where the fence needed to be moved, if it needed to be moved. So that's a concern. If I move it, will you accept the new boundary? We tried to set up a meeting with our city councilman and the officer, but that was not attended by either. I guess I'm just a little frustrated with the process. So I'll try to schedule that meeting again with Councilman Hodges and the officer, but I guess in part I'm curious why the city is interested in the 2 feet.
Okay. We'll address it here just shortly then, John. Thank you so much. Thanks. I know this is nerve-wracking. Thank you for being here. So,
thank you.
Anybody want to address any points now? Okay. We'll have Councilman Hodges maybe reach out. Okay, we'll have Councilman. He plays Santa Claus during the month of December quite a bit. So, but I'll talk to him and have him.
Priorities, man.
I mean, he is Santa Claus. Okay, we'll have him. I'll get with him, and thank you, John. Okay, I don't have any other forms currently. I know there were other forms previous, so if you've emailed a comment in before and you'd like to come forward at this point, feel free to come forward.
Can I just make a
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, give us one. Sorry, give us 1
a
second.
quick comment from Mr. Applegarth. In my district, I've had a couple of these, and I went and met with the resident individually a couple of times, and then we arranged a time for the officer, all 3 of us, to go meet on property and work through the process and found some very good solutions so I definitely encourage you to just continue with the process. We're not looking to be punitive to anyone in any way, shape, or form, but to find resolutions to the issues that we're seeing. And at least so far, the process that I've been involved with, when all the parties engage in it and are willing to collaborate and compromise a little bit, it's not too difficult.
Okay. Mrs. Vogel, I presume, correct? If you could just state your name, even though we've got just...
Yeah, my name's Rebecca Vogel. Bear with me, also I'm nervous. I'd like to share some history about our property encroachment as well. We received it in July. The notice included an aerial view of our property, which the picture was dated July of 2021. It informed us that our fence extended onto city property. Specifically, it said, "As you can see, there are improvements on city property that were placed, installed, or modified by you or previous owner." We learned that that statement is inaccurate, as I will mention later. We offered to purchase the land, and the city's assistant attorney said that wouldn't be fair to those who can't afford to purchase the land, even when the cost of correcting the encroachment exceeded the value of the land. As homeowners for nearly 12 years, we were shocked. The fence was in place when we moved in. After we worked through that initial shock and frustration, we assumed responsibility of the encroachment and hired a contractor to move the fence, paying $1,200 up front. Begrudgingly, we regarded this incident as a tough lesson in the principle of let the buyer beware. However, we later learned from our neighbors who are in attendance tonight that they're the original homeowners. They too received a notice of encroachment, and we learned that The city replaced the original fence over 15 years ago as part of a skate park project. When we reported this to the city, they initially denied responsibility. A day or two after we submitted a grandma request, we received a call from the city, and the city confirmed that it had indeed paid for and installed the fence. The city then offered us a revocable encroachment agreement to maintain the land as is. While this seemed like a resolution, the terms of the agreement are deeply concerning. The agreement allows the city to reclaim the property with just 120 days' notice and leaves us 100% financially responsible for restoring the land. The agreement gives the city the ability to reclaim the land for any reason. It also requires us to fully indemnify the city, its staff, and its elected officials for all past and future issues. It also contradicts itself regarding the use of the land, saying that we can install sprinkling systems, but then to not put any personal property on the land. My husband will further
Perfect.
discuss that.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello.
Been a while.
It's been a while, Coach.
I coached Ryan in soccer when he was little, so it's good to see you here.
Wow, he's not little, you're old.
That's true.
Yes, so good evening. My name is Ryan Vogel. I'm Rebecca's husband. As my wife explained, the agreement includes terms that undermine the assurances we were given and create significant risks for us as property owners. The agreement also includes an entire agreement clause which negates the assurances we were given that the city intends to let us maintain the land. When we proposed reasonable amendments to clarify and retain our rights, the city rejected them. The city's position is that the revocable encroachment is a standard document. It has been approved for any such circumstances, and the city does not want to make changes to each individual property. Well, how many circumstances similar to ours and our neighbors exist in the city? Is the city truly comfortable asking its residents to give up so many of their rights and agree to a document that contradicts itself to correct a mistake the city made? Our request to the city is fair and simple. If the intent is to allow us to maintain the property, that intent should be clarified in writing. Asking us to sign an agreement that offers us no protection, harms our property value, and waives our right to hold the city accountable should we ever need to is unreasonable. If the city intends to reclaim the land, the city should correct the error it created when it replaced the original fence. The city's position that a developer created the encroachment is irrelevant. By replacing the original fence, the city removed the encroachment created by the developer, established a new boundary, and assumed responsibility. We also have concerns about the city directing us to an administrative law judge if we disagree with them. To this point, we have only been directed to work with members of the city's executive branch, and ALJ is another executive authority. The U.S. Supreme Court recently held that the SEC violated an individual's constitutional right to a jury trial by subjecting them to administrative hearings, which included ALJs. Given that quiet title issues in Utah can raise both legal and equitable questions, is the city confident that this is the appropriate venue for resolving these matters? In conclusion, we've acted in good faith and taken responsibility for our mistakes, even paying over $1,200 to address what we assumed was our error. But the city made the same assumption we did and created the problem when it replaced the original fence. We asked the city to hold itself accountable by either amending the agreement to reflect fair terms or cover the cost of moving the fence it installed incorrectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Have they been in contact with anyone?
I haven't seen their issue, but I can follow up with.
We'll follow up with you, Ryan, on
It's
this.
that, I think this is one I did look at because it looked, we built the fence. So he is correct, and she is also correct. Each one of these is a little unique. And I think this is the first time we've come across one where we created it back 15 years ago, and there was no record. We didn't know that until they called and started looking. So we can address it.
And please feel free to reach out to any one of us.
Yeah.
And we've been in touch, we've talked a little bit before, and then they went through the process. To their credit, they went through the process correctly and tried to make it right, and then found this stuff after.
Yeah,
the fact.
this one's really unique as opposed to other ones because we built the fence.
Yeah.
That's a very different thing than what we've seen up to this point, right? So yeah, I think that's worth some further digging into and seeing what kind of a resolution we can make there.
Yeah.
Sure, thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah,
This is a
that's great.
council, I think, since, this is the first time we've heard about this site after, so thank you. Truly, thank you for bringing this up, and we'll be in touch, so. Tell your parents hi. His dad was my professor, too, at the college. Great professor, one of the best. Is he still teaching?
Is that you?
Yeah, tell him I said hello.
It might be Teddy,
So,
or maybe Jared. I don't even know what the boundary is of the, we're just,
do you know who your council member is, Ryan? Okay, okay.
Teddy, he's in all his problems. And he's been helping Santa.
Okay. With Matt, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Teddy's quite busy, and I'll put Teddy on theirs. I'll take charge of yours, then I'll take responsibility for yours, and I'll get with you, and I'll follow up with you then on this one.
And please note, you can talk to any of us, no matter what district you officially live in.
Yeah, that's why we were having that discussion. I'm like, I'm not sure if who's covered that, because we're just council members. We're here to help anyone.
We tried to kind of delegate to each council person's own district, but sometimes there's overlap.
Yeah,
And
and we don't care.
we work together, so we're happy to help.
And frankly, this kind of an issue isn't just
It's not just a
one
Teddy
council
issue.
member's
Yeah.
purveyance to look at and consider and stuff like that. But I would just say, I appreciate all the comments when we have, I guess I understand coming and making a presentation for the council if you're not used to it, if you haven't been here and you don't know us, you haven't heard from us, I guess that's a little, creates some nerves, but we really appreciate the feedback. I've said this for 5 years. We love it when people come. We love to hear the feedback. We love to have things brought to our attention. It gives us stuff to focus on, to work on behind the scenes, to be your advocates, to get that stuff looked at in the best and fairest ways possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You know.
So I'll be in touch shortly. Thanks, guys. Any other public comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 6, our city council reports. We'll start with Jared.
I do have one. I'm our representative on the Unified Fire Authority board. There's an issue we're dealing with again. I've not been able to update you all on because I've been made aware of it just the last few weeks. If you recall, this time last year, the Salt Lake County Mayor's Office was trying to reduce, if not remove, the canyon recreation funding from our budget. They were claiming that the reason that they were doing so was that they wanted the town of Brighton recently incorporated or added an additional annexed area, wanted to make sure they were being treated the same as others. I'll leave that as it was. Councilmember Stewart, who's from Riverton, he's many of our representative on the county council. He's also been on the UFA board for a number of years, worked hard to help them with a solution that addressed that issue for them. We thought that was solved, and that they say that is solved. However, this year, we were informed just a few weeks ago, the mayor's office is proposing a cut to that same budget item from the Salt Lake County General Fund by 20%. Quote, in order to start a conversation about whether or not they should be paying that amount. When I asked, and this is all on public record, this is part of a public meeting, when I asked what the reasoning was for the 20%, what methodology was used, the response was that there was none. That was just a number they picked to begin a conversation. That conversation was that the fire chief had about a week's notice to prepare a response to an over $600,000 reduction in a vital emergency service to the Salt Lake County Board. Subsequent meetings and conversations have taken place. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee for UFA. We had a committee meeting last week. That was one of the items we put on there. We discussed it. The mayor's representative didn't attend that meeting, but we were trying to wrap our head around what the real intentions were, what our response should be. I won't bore you with it, but really the argument they're making is kind of based on a false pretense. The fact that an arbitrary number was picked is a little concerning, and the way to start a conversation is not. I made the point yesterday in the full board meeting, it's a pretty aggressive way to, quote, start a conversation. Her comments during that meeting were now that the purpose of this is that while there's a state statute that designates these recreation areas and allows the Salt Lake County to use general funds to pay the cost for providing emergency services in those recreation areas, they're not required to. So they're taking that as their cue to look for alternate funding. She then went on to say that she thinks those alternate funding sources are within UFSA's members or UFA's members or a reduction in service, rather than looking at the over $6 billion in revenue that those same recreation areas create for Salt Lake County businesses, residents, et cetera. So essentially, as it is right now, they're asking either UFA, which includes 4 direct city members, Herriman, Riverton, Holiday, Cottonwood Heights, and UFSA, the taxing district. They're either asking UFA entirely to subsidize the emergency services costs for all of those other people. 98% of the calls for service in those recreation areas are for non-UFA residents, whether they're other areas of Utah or international, et cetera. So they're wanting us to either subsidize that cost or reduce the services. My comment was that if we need to look at alternate funding sources, let's work together and find alternate funding sources. There's that 6 number with a B. It seems like a pretty good place to look. So those are your initial conversations. Our direction to the UFA board was for them to prepare a memo detailing what in fact UFSA is as a taxing district, how it works, what UFA is as a service provider, how it works, and then the cost of providing services to those areas. There seems to be a misunderstanding, not just at the mayor's office, but at the county level, that UFA is still the county's fire department, and more concerning that the property tax collected by UFSA is the county's money. One of the county council members in their meeting actually said, that's our money, we should decide how we use it. They're part of the taxing district. That money goes to the taxing district, and there's a 13-member board that decides how that money is used to pay their member fee to then receive the service from UFA. So we're going to try to embark on some communication and education and see if we can find out what the actual concern is, if it really is trying to find alternate funding sources to help the county with its budget issues, then we're more than happy to join forces and go to the legislature and look for those sorts of solutions. But if they're wanting Herriman residents or other UFA residents to subsidize those services for the others, then we definitely are going to have some issues. So that's kind of the hot thing right now. The rest of the budget process is proceeding. We've had a few meetings. There are committee meetings for budget will commence with finance, benefits, and comp. I've kind of told you all about some of those things that I'm pushing offline on those. Those are progressing fine, but this one kind of came out of left field. So there you go.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think there should be some education that it's not our money county, it's our money the people.
The taxpayers, it's part of a taxing district, right? It's collected by that tax district. They have 2 representatives on that board, just as we have representatives on these boards. It's not our money, it's that district's money, and we meet as a board to decide how it's spent. So, yeah, well, we're gonna try to go with the collaborative approach. The county council, I believe, approved the mayor's initial budget, which says that this cut would be effective beginning our new budget year, July 1st, and we have until then to talk to them and find a different solution. So they're open to talking to us, but not in the 2-week window that they had to make a decision.
Wow.
I don't know, that's an interesting way to start a conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. Keep us posted on that. Thank you. Sherry?
Nope, I'm good.
Steve?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
since I've got 3 things I can report on, kind of 2 together. We had our last, kind of our transit fresh look for the year until we've talked about it before, but again, reiterate that was, all signs are pointing towards we'll have that bus route going by March that will leave from the Daybreak Station, go through the city, past Towne Center here, out to Redemption, all the way down Sentinel, and then over to Front Runner and Draper and back, both ways, both directions. So that's, I think, good news, a good first step that way. I failed to mention earlier, we opened Juniper Canyon Trailhead. We're in that further trail. Sherry and I were both there to open the ribbon cutting of that trail. It was amazing, just even further up the canyon, connecting a couple more neighborhoods into the trail system, so that's always exciting. And then Transcom, sit on Transcom as well. They updated some dates for us. I thought I'd just update some dates for us all. And, so the 3 Bangor intersections, we know 98 does shut down east-west by Christmas. And then 2700 will follow suit. North-south will be closed, so we'll have a lot of connectivity issues for the meantime, but they will all be completed the whole freeway will be done by the end of 2025. Bacchus Highway, they're hoping to start next year, straightening that out to connect down through 7300 West. They reported that, hoping to start that next year as well. And now they have a new anticipated start date to complete the freeway portion of Mountain View Corridor from Old Bingham Highway in West Jordan all the way to Porter Rockwell. They're looking at starting that in 2027 now, so that's the latest update from them. So, good things have a lot happening in this corner of the valley. When they put up the map, there were 3 out of the 7 big projects they were talking about are in Herriman. So, and then I did get a call from Doug Young today, developer. He did finally officially secure the $3 million plus for that bridge on 6400 West. So that's secured. It's, again, that's a funding coming from another source that we don't have to find a way to fund that. So that's just, he's been a great partner securing some infrastructure dollars lately. So it's fantastic. So, yes.
I have a question on your bus, and maybe it's not necessarily the right place to have it, or a future agenda item. I was just wondering if, as we roll forward on that, if we start looking at it as a cost-benefit analysis per se, that we say, how much, this is probably terrible, if we see crime spike with it. I do know that as we see public transportation come into communities, tends to be a spike in criminal activity associated with that. Is there a way that you can, I know you guys have a pretty sophisticated way of tracking your calls and things like that. Can you add a little widget on there that says this is associated with transit? I'm not suggesting that it's a bad thing to have transit. I just think that as a decision makers, we should understand the impact that has, even for planning for police and things like that. If we open up to more public transportation into our community, what is it doing to our law enforcement community, and what do we have to do on the HCC side to compensate for that? Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, it just seems like maybe we should try and track that a little bit for you and for us.
Great point. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.1. We're grateful to have Lisa here with us tonight. We'll do she's going to present our biannual Victim Advocate Services update. So, Lisa, welcome. We're glad to have you in our city. She does amazing work.
Okay, so my program is half funded, actually less than half funded by the Victims of Crime Act Fund grant, and I'm required to just kind of give you an update twice a year, so here I am. The mission of our program is to serve as a more approachable and comfortable advocate for those who may have an adverse reaction to police presence, to help with logistical and emotional needs during and following a crisis, and to provide a comfortable space separate from the police department to help victims. The ways we do that is I don't wear a uniform. I'm not a sworn officer, so I have more confidentiality than officers do and have less that I have to report mandatorily. than officers do. And I have the availability to meet with victims anytime that's convenient for them in any place that they're comfortable with. So if not at the police department, then in their own home, in a library, in a restaurant, even just over the phone if that's what they prefer. Some of the things that I try to do, or our program tries to do, is to reduce the psychological trauma. I'm nervous also, if you can't tell.
Very intimidating
I know, we're
people.
pretty mean up here.
All right, so I try to reduce the psychological trauma that a victim experiences after a crime or even just a traumatic event. That's done by providing crisis intervention, emotional support, criminal justice guidance and advocacy, victim advocacy through other services throughout the valley. Crime victim compensation is a big one and a right that a victim has. I liaison with the law enforcement and our prosecutor. Logistical support that's provided is resources, information, education, and safety planning. A little bit about my statistics. I currently am the only one employed by our program, so it's me. My grant runs with the fiscal year, so I'm providing you the stats for July of 2023 through June of 2024. And I'm very bad at keeping track of my stats. So approximately I served over 271 people, or worked with 271 victims of crime. 197 females and 74 females within that time frame. And just to give you an idea, about 10% of those are non-English speakers, as we have a high Venezuelan and Argentinian population out here. I'm getting very good at Google Translate and calling our translator line. And so information and referrals provided, I provided 1,073, holy. My main clientele are domestic violence victims. I do work with sex assault victims, child abuse victims, but domestic violence crime victims are my highest category that I work with, and we had 211 that I worked with, as opposed to 192 the year prior. This kind of gives you a breakdown of the different types of family crime and the amount that we get. Criminal family crimes are assaults, threats, property damage, unlawful detention, and violations of court orders. In my pie chart, you see the family offense, domestic violence, criminal. Those are the ones that were actually charged on scene. The ones that say family offense other, that would be your property damage, your unlawful detentions, your violations of the court orders, and your threats that are associated with family crimes. And I want to point out the fact that we had 16 events that triggered our strangulation protocol. So that's 16 strangulations within this year. Non-criminals, I review all of those police reports that come in to check for red flags, to check for recurring verbal arguments, civil questions. I'll look at keep the peace, so when people are getting a divorce and trying to separate or separating from an abusive partner, they'll ask for police to come and accompany them to get things from their home. I also look at all of our mental health calls as much as I can to see if any domestic violence potentially could come out of that, just to offer resources to those who are in need. On top of family crimes, I also work with any other crimes where a victim may be involved. So we have physical assaults. We had quite a big one this past May, June, where a young boy was actually killed in the process. Not he himself was physically assaulted, but in the act of the assault, he happened to get killed. So that was a big case of mine. Threats are often made, especially with scams that are going around, so we work with victims of that, just mostly in education and in any mental health resources to go with the trauma of being threatened. Stalking, identity theft, harassment, and bigger portion that I'm starting to see are traffic incidences. We're having a lot more road rage, DUIs, and hit and runs, especially if there's an injury or a victim involved, then I will get involved with that. We've also had a few burglaries that I've worked with, and you can kind of see the numbers for our stats this last year. Give you kind of an example of a big case that I worked on to see how everything comes together with providing resources and all the stuff that I do. I had an aggravated assault and that I worked with. This one actually didn't have a strangulation component with it, but this was a disabled person that was assaulted. And I'll just pull through some of the resources that I utilized in helping this victim, and it's still an ongoing process. Her case actually began with a welfare check. So a welfare check is when a friend or family member calls in on behalf of this person saying, I'm concerned for them. Will an officer please go check on them? This officer went and did the welfare check and came back to me and said, hey, I have concerns about this woman. I happened to look up her history and saw that at least 3 other welfare checks had been called in on her within the last several months. So I reached out to her and I offered my services. She definitely was a victim of domestic violence. She was starting to realize it, but had no idea how to leave her situation. So we'd set up a time to meet the next day to offer resources to help her. She had a bunch of incidences she wanted to report, but didn't want to report them until after she'd gotten to safety. So I was going to help her with that process. The next morning, about 15 minutes before our scheduled meeting, she called me and said, I'm in the emergency room. He assaulted me this morning. So I hightailed it over to the emergency room with a couple of our officers. We got her reported, got everything taken care of. So in that, we collected evidence by getting pictures, medical records, getting her to write a statement, getting interviewed. He wound up being arrested. Our officers did a wonderful job with that. In her reporting, we found out her service animal that she had was also assaulted. So we got veterinary records. It's over the process of many weeks and months of working with her, I provided her with financial assistance. Her water was shut off the day after she came home from the hospital because her abuser hadn't been paying the water bill that she was unaware of. So we quickly got that turned back on for her and paid for. Provided her gift cards to get her medications because of all of the other expenses that she'd taken on in trying to make sure her other utilities didn't get turned off. She didn't have enough to pay for her prescription refills. I met with the district attorney in making sure that everything got filed, all charges. I worked with our investigator in reporting the one incident. She went on to report all of the past incidences. So we got photographs and interviews and statements and everything about that. I helped her get a civil protective order. When a case goes to the district court, it often takes longer, and our jail release agreement tends to run out before they can get to court to put a longer agreement in place, so we have to go the civil route. So I made sure she had access to legal services to help her with that, and even provided her transportation and emotional support through her civil protective order hearings. My heck, what else did we do? We found out the dog has to be retired because of the injury that it sustained. It's no longer able to help her as a service animal. It'll become an emotional support animal. She'll get to keep it, but she needs a new service animal. So we got her in touch with Animal Services to help her find a new animal and continue to work with her throughout her long court process. So that's how everything comes together in my position. So, any questions?
Sorry you don't have anything to do.
What?
I'm sorry you have so little to do. You're
I know.
amazing.
I usually just sit there twiddling my thumbs all day long. So
It's amazing, actually.
thank you.
At least you have a tough job, but an important one, and you do it well. So we're lucky to have you out here. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other comments?
Great job.
What an awesome resource to have in the community, and thanks for the good work you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Good to have your family here to support you. So, love it. It's good for them to hear. I love it.
So you're saying you made them come?
The head nod. I love it. Well, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate your work.
It's good to have your reports because I think that you don't really understand the complexity of everything that goes on in the job that you do. So thanks for sharing.
271 cases in 1 year. Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay, well, on that note, man. Okay, we're going to go on to item. We've got some public hearings tonight, so we're going to start with 9.1, a discussion and consideration of a resolution approving a petition to create one or more public infrastructure districts and authorizing the execution of the public infrastructure district governing document for the Panorama development. Blake.
All right, so I'm going to present for 9.1 and 9.2 in one presentation. It'll be two separate motions, but it'll be one presentation for the two items. The location of these items are adjacent to each other on the south end of the city. And we discussed these in the last city council meeting during the work session, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So just some information about this district is I kind of wanted to go through the process of what we've been through already on this. So a letter of intent was delivered to the city from the developer. It was checked to make sure it complied with the PID policy. Once we determined it did, there was a community development committee meeting held, which is part of the policy. That committee gets together and reviews the LOI and determines if it's meets the grade to go to the next step. So that committee did say to move it on. So we went to the council, they submitted a petition, did the governing document, and then that was where we had the council meeting last week. Was the governing document was reviewed against the PID policy to verify what complied and what didn't, and we got good feedback from that meeting, and we're able to come to this meeting now. Just those other bullet points on the bottom, it's kind of for public consumption. What is a PID and what does it do? It's kind of a toolbox, so to say, that the developers may use to generate funding for infrastructure. Helps the infrastructure get built first rather than waiting to get built after, which we've often seen. They're allowed by state code, and all the improvements must be public that are paid for by the PID. And then it's the council's sole discretion whether they want to approve it or not. So, and you're entitled as the creating entity in the state code. So, might hear that again. So these are the two districts, colored in pink and blue. And so we have the Panorama on the north end in blue, in pink, and the Soleil Hills on the south end in the blue. And then the governing documents for both spell out a maximum mill levy of 5 mills and intend to construct $55 million in infrastructure. We'll have a list here in a minute. So for the Soleil Hills PID, we'll go over that one first. It's a little bit over 550 acres. They're going to create 5 initial districts. One district, the first one is highlighted, or is hatched here on the map in blue. And then the other districts are kind of down in the corner. They're little 100 square foot squares, and then there'll be a plat for each one of these, which I'll show here. Here's the initial district. It's such a large area, it takes 2 pages. And then these are the small squares, so we'll have an individual plat for each one of these squares. They'll all be recorded, and then if they want to go into the annexation area, which is it's described in the governing document as the remainder area that was in blue, then they have to amend this plat and get it recorded, and they amend it to the area they need where they're going to create the PID. And so this map shows the annexation area. And so anybody that's in the initial activated PID district will need to pay the mill levy. Anybody that's in the annexation area will not. So it'll need consent from anybody that has properties in those areas. So the Panorama PID, all similar things, just a different area, except for their initial area is just 5 districts. They're 5,000 square foot squares. and there's 5 of them, you can see here on this map. Total of 0.57 acres. And same thing for them, if they want to expand into the area, they'll have to annex or amend one of those final local entity plats and get it recorded. So this is the project list. I did receive a map not too long ago for the Panorama projects, and John left, but we could have gotten it up. But it's paying for the public infrastructure not for water, for these, because the water is going to collect impact fees, because that's how the bond gets repaid for the water tanks and the pump station and the transmission lines. So it'll pay for the utilities in the road and all the roadway improvements and landscaping for both projects. So this is the process of what's going to happen if this gets approved tonight. And we are here at the public hearing. So this item's on for public hearing tonight. Once this is done, the asterisk on the bottom is the part that's always been the toughest with these, is this gets approved and the clock starts ticking 30 days to get the final local entity plats into the Lieutenant Governor's office. So they already have those in for review right now. So anticipating if it is approved, they should hit that deadline and not have to start the process over again. And this will help them construct the improvements as part of their projects and get things moving in that area. So happy to answer any questions if you want to before the public hearing or after.
Any questions now? Okay. Thank you, Blake. We'll go ahead and we'll do 2 public hearings, and we'll do the public hearing for 9.1 first. So this will be on the Panorama development. So at this point, we'll open the public hearing. See no comment, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will note Councilman Hodges is now online. Teddy, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. And you a yay vote on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So that motion carries. We'll note that Councilman Shields was stepped out, but we'll do that 4-0.
I'm going to do my explanation again for public.
Sure.
So this will only be the second one of these we've ever done. So I just want to kind of explain for the public again what this is and why we're doing it. So Public Infrastructure District, it is a tax levied on the properties in that area, specifically to pay for the designated infrastructure in this agreement. The alternative would be the traditional way that it's been done in Utah is that the municipality collects an impact fee. Typically, the developer would front the money to put in that infrastructure, charge a fee from the next purchaser, say of a home. They'll pay each of these fees to the city, and then the city reimburses the developer those amounts. The problem is that the state statutes that dictate what we can charge for those fees the process does not allow us to update it frequently enough to actually cover the costs of it. And what we have found over a number of years with previous agreements, again, before any of us were sitting here, is that the city has ended up being on the hook for those increased costs. So all of the residents are paying for those costs rather than the people who built and bought that new home, which created the impact on the infrastructure, hence the name. This tool, I'm a financial planner by trade. I really don't like it as public policy, but it's the alternative that's there that puts the burden of that new infrastructure on the people who are buying the property and using that infrastructure. So those people will have that added line item on their property tax that others wouldn't. Concerns me is that the parameters of this, that 0.005 mill levy, the school district's mill levy is 0.0042 something. On my property tax, it's like $2,300 a year. I mean, that's the amount that could be added to them. So I just really hope that when people go to purchase homes in I think Olympia is the other one, any of these areas, that the disclosure process is adequate, that they really understand that they're having that additional amount added onto all these things rather than just looking at the purchase price of their home. So that's my soapbox about it. That's what this is. And
Yeah, just to add on to the end of this, I don't remember what page is on page 40 of our packet. A disclosure outlining the impact of any applicable property tax in substantially the following form. In it, quote, under the maximum property tax rate of the district, which Jared just stated, for every $100,000 of taxable value, there will be an additional annual property tax of $500 for the duration of the district's bonds. So times 400,000, that's an extra $2,000 every year that's added onto the price of these homes. And so I echo what you're saying. I sure hope people pay attention because we talk a lot about affordability, and $400,000 is a cheap house in Herriman. Our report was 600 and something today, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a substantial amount of property tax that's added on to the cost of these homes, and so.
it could be, that's the maximum.
Right. But I don't know too many times that we don't hit the maximum, at least for a period of time, and it's not because anybody's trying to gouge anybody, it's just because the cost of infrastructure has become so astronomical that it's difficult. But on the flip side of it, at least the city, the whole tax-paying body of the city is not having to absorb this cost on their property taxes.
I think there's a couple other things to point out here too, is kind of piggybacking on the two things you said. So number one is the infrastructure is being paid for in today's dollars and is being completed in a today timeframe. The reason that's significant is that even though there's a $2,000 a year or a couple $100 a month added on to a monthly payment on there, the reality is that if we waited and did it with impact fees, and you wait over 20 or 30 years to collect enough to do it all, it gets constructed in little pieces, and it's not enough to cover it, and then all the taxpayers in Herriman will have to pay more, right? And so I think you guys both touched on that point, is that new growth is now paying for the infrastructure to support that new growth. I think an important factor about this is that because of the disclosure of the additional costs associated with the mill levy, we have gotten reports in some other areas where PIDs have been used that the sales prices of the homes are coming down slightly from what may have been expected as an offset for that increased tax liability. So there's a little bit of a free market balance that happens in there. And then ultimately people have the choice to live in the Panorama development or another development, right? And so if they choose to live in what I think is gonna be, you know, the whole hillside all the way, Panorama, Soleil, everything down there is gonna be a very desirable, very beautiful community that I think people will want to live in and be likely willing to pay that premium to live there. So at least that's the theory, right? So.
Right. Okay, thank you all for the explanation.
So having said that, I'll make a motion.
Okay, let's do a motion.
Okay.
To approve resolution number R41-2024, providing for the creation of the Panorama Public Infrastructure Districts number 1 through 5 as independent districts, authorizing and approving a governing document and an interlocal agreement. Oh, appointing boards of trustees, I've got this thing to read, and other related matters.
Okay, motion by Jared.
Second.
Second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Okay, we'll go ahead and open a public hearing on item 9.2, which is for the Soleil Hills development. No public comment. I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any further comment or discussion on this one? Same thing. Okay, I'll look for a motion on 9.2 then.
A motion to approve resolution number R42-2024, providing for the creation of the Soleil Hills Public Infrastructure Districts number 1 through 5 as independent districts, authorizing and approving a governing document and an interlocal agreement, appointing boards of trustees, and other related matters.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Sherry. We'll go this way. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
And Jared?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 9.3, a public hearing and consideration of a resolution amending the fiscal year 2025 budget and job classification plan. Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor. Given the agenda tonight, I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly, but highlight some of the major items I want you as a council to be aware of. So first, we're going to just delve right into the general fund. So there's a few carryovers that I'm requesting. Carryovers are items that were started in the prior fiscal year, but were completed as June 30th, so the items need to be carried over. So as you can see, the major one on there is pavement management, which for the public, that is what we use to repair the roads with. There were some projects at year-end that were completed, so we're just carrying over the remaining budget to the current fiscal year to finish those. A couple of amendments also in the general fund. So one is we have recovered about $35,000 from insurance companies to cover streetlight damage. Wire theft is still a major issue within the city, so thank you to both our HR and operations departments for working on getting those recoveries. Another major one is we did have a note payable in last year's budget to cover the new hook lift that was being purchased. That hook lift wasn't finished being built until this year, so I will be bringing forward another note payable, aka they used to be called capital leases before the accounting terminology changed, later in the year to execute that. Moving on to the police fund, in the HCC meeting we already discussed most of this, but the police department's requesting 2 new officers. So this would fund those 2 officers. In addition, they are partnering with a couple other cities for scheduling software where these other cities will assist in paying for that software. In addition, we receive liquor enforcement funds from the state, so on the sale of liquor, we do receive a portion of that money back that is taxed on that. For enforcement purposes, the police department is using a portion of that money for a new software. However, we do have a chunk left that needs to be restricted, so I do like to put it in the budget so it doesn't get forgotten about. And then they did receive a small grant for some computers. In the ARPA fund, as you may or may not remember, we did close this fund out and transferred the excess funds into capital projects to help fund projects for the next 2 budget years. Once we did the final reconciliation, there was about $272,000 left. That's when taking into account the remaining project budgets that weren't spent, and also we had some extra interest income. There is a detail in the packet showing the projects and how much they had left over and all the projects were complete in there. Impact fee funds, the major one is carryover, so projects that need to be completed. There's a full list in the packet. Also, transportation fund is the same thing. There's about $1.1 million in carryover projects. There is, of note, a reimbursement agreement I found that we hadn't put in the budget yet for Axia that was approved last year. This, I'll make my plug when you see this in January, is we are looking to purchase new software that will integrate a lot of these programs that are currently separated, and this is one of the reasons this got missed, because I have to reconcile 3 different programs together. Not that that's an excuse, but I have to make a pitch for the software while I can. And then in the impact fee fund, there was a small carryover, and that's design funds for the Station 103 rebuild. There's a couple funds we aren't currently using, however, there are still projects occurring in them, and that's our new development street lights and new development street signs. Previously, the developers would pay us, then we would go purchase those items. Now we're requiring the developers to purchase those directly, so there aren't new funds coming into those funds. However, we still have projects we need to complete and then do a final reconciliation before I come to you as a council to release those funds. And then there is a small carryover in the Development Services Fund. They did start a fee study, which is close to being complete, but this is to cover the cost of that study. Then in capital projects, probably the largest of the carryovers. The first is about 18 million in carryover projects. However, 14 million of that is that Olympia Boulevard grant that we received that we will pass through to the developer when they make the request for that funding. One item of note is with the budget, the council did pass a number of playground amenity replacements. The Parks Department is requesting that we move the Ranches 2 playground replacement to the Grand Trotter Park replacement. Apparently the parts for Grand Trotter Park are no longer available and the playground amenity is not serviceable. It needs to be replaced. And then the Ranches Park 2 apparently is very close to another playground, so the Parks Department is requesting that we eliminate the Ranches Park 2 playground and use those funds to replace the Grand Trotter Park amenity. The Parks Department also did get a small grant for Main Street turf conversion that they're working on. That is a project that was approved with the 25 budget. We did receive some corridor preservation funding of 1.5 million. However, we did make those purchases last year, in the last fiscal year, so this is reimbursing us for those purchases. And then in the Public Works Facility Fund, a request to carry over the design and consulting funds that were budgeted in 24 of 300,000. In capital equipment, there's a few carryovers. One is for that hook lift we discussed that will be covered with a capital lease. The next one is there was a truck budgeted in the water fund, or excuse me, in the Parks Fund. However, the Parks Department elected to purchase a vehicle from the Water Fund. So because it's an enterprise fund and a governmental, the Parks Department had to buy the truck and actually pay the Water Fund for that. So that's reducing that funding because we purchased it from the Water Fund. And then carrying over money for the Parks vehicle that was damaged that we received insurance money for. And then of note, the vehicles for those 2 new officers are also being requested to be budgeted in capital equipment. In water, another large carryover amount for projects of about 24.7 million. Of note, 16.5 million of that is bond proceeds, so that's that Zone 2 and 3 project that was approved a couple months ago. The Water Department has also been successful in securing a couple grants. One is for a secondary water line of 1.58 million, and then also another 4 million for a tank in Olympia. Of note, as I had mentioned, the Parks Department purchased a vehicle from the Water Fund. The Water Fund would like to use those proceeds to purchase a Blue Stakes vehicle. This was actually included in the requested replacements last year when we did the initial budget for 25. However, one checkbox wasn't marked in the software and it didn't catch on my reports, but they did submit the full justification on why that needed to be replaced. So it should have actually been in the budget, but one check mark missed my report. Another reason we need an integrated system. We're almost done. Water impact fee, they had a few carryovers, about 627,000. There was 2 reimbursement agreements that weren't in the budget that I missed. One was for Porter Rockwell betterments that was approved in March of 23, and then the Axie Business Park reimbursement, it was also in June. Of note, as we wrap up the Main Street project, we are able to release 1.6 million that we had budgeted for that project because we had enough in bond proceeds and also interest earnings to cover the water portion of that project. Moving on to storm drain, which I think is the last one. There are a number of carryover projects in the impact fee fund of 927,000. And then there was a project in the ARPA fund that wasn't complete, and that was to relocate stormwater ponds in the Auto Mall. This is just moving it to stormwater since that ARPA fund is closed. And that is it for the amendments. One thing new that we did with the 25 budget is we had you as a council adopt a job classification plan. So essentially that lists all of the different jobs and the number of FTEs citywide. With the addition of those 2 police officers that are being proposed, the job classification plan would also need to be increased to account for those 2 new officers so they can be hired. So as you see, the FTEs in the police move from 48 to 50, and then overall citywide, we have 214.8 full-time equivalents. So this includes both part-time and full-time employees.
I was going to ask who the .8 was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have my suspicions.
It's chief.
Some of you are shorter than others.
It's
Are you
seasonals
1.8 or
and
just
crossing
0.8? That's the
guards.
question.
We went through that pretty quickly, but there are any questions for the public hearing?
Nope. Appreciate it, Kyle. Okay, we'll go ahead and open. We do need to do a public hearing on this, so we will open the public hearing. Seeing none, look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve resolution number R43-2024, approving an amendment to the 2025 fiscal year budget and the fiscal year 2025-2026 job classification plan.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Thank you, Kyle. Move on to item 10, the consent agenda. Look for a motion on the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda as written.
Second.
Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 11.
A little comment.
No,
I
it's
have to.
done.
Just about the traffic signal maintenance. It brings up a question about integration of our traffic signals with the construction that's going on around. There's just like huge backups on the corridor and other places. Anything we can do to help better communicate the impacts that that's having on our local areas, to change the light timing, to compensate for what's going on would be greatly appreciated, so. They're messing it up. Okay, that's it. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I tried.
I know you tried so hard. You were so close. Okay, we'll move on to item 11.1, consideration of a master development agreement with Elevated Acquisitions, LLC, for the Commons at Herriman Towne Center mixed-use project, located at 4900 West, 134th South.
John, can you put the developer's presentation up? I'm going to invite the developer up, Sean. You guys have met him before. He's got a quick presentation he wanted to give before. Figured I'd let him go and not steal any of his thunder. He can steal all my thunder, and then I'll just fill in the holes at the end if there are any. So. Yep.
So my name's Sean Hardy. I'm here representing Elevated. I'll try to run through this quickly because some of you may have kind of seen this presentation before, but we think it's important just to talk about who we are and how excited for the project we are, and just kind of talk about the project overall. So who we are Elevated Property Company. We're founded by Fred Bruning, Sean Dennison, and Chris Byers. Chris Byers is here tonight with me. Fred Bruning, our founder and CEO, also formerly the founder and CEO of CenterCal Properties. And so we have, extensive project experience in the state, specifically retail. Kind of several of us at Elevated are formerly of CenterCal. And so kind of with that, we did Mountain View Village in nearby Riverton, Station Park in Farmington, Canyon Corners in Park City. And then this next slide is our color plan for the project. So I'll just briefly talk about the components. We've got retail buildings A and B in the upper left. That upper northwest corner is the residential component. Building D 100 is the large big box. Building C100 in the lower left corner next to CVS, standalone junior box. And then we have 6 single-tenant building pads in addition. And so the dotted line kind of that we're going to zoom in on here, we're kind of going to zoom in on the central gathering space, which is really going to be kind of the heart and soul of the project. So it's going to be very integrated to the mixed-use component with the residential immediately to the north, so residents can, walk down and within a few steps they're in this kind of really rich retail environment. And so some of the components in here include, terrace seating, artificial turf, the water feature, the restaurant patios on either side, kind of activating the space. So it's a really kind of detailed and kind of rich environment that's going to be, very high end, a lot of components, very active space. It'll kind of serve as the key heart and soul of the project. This is a view of the rendering of the central gathering space, kind of looking south through it. You can see the terraced steps. We're calling those the Herriman steps. And so kind of this is looking back north, so kind of walking up, you can see the massing of the residential to the north. A kind of a nice shot of the water feature, mature landscaping, the restaurant patios on either side. Kind of some more nice renderings of the fire pit and the FF&E that we're going to program out. This is building C100. This is intended to show that it's still very walkable. Kind of C is connected to A and B with a nice walking path. You can see the resi in the back. Going to be some amazing views for the residential of the mountains. These are some elevations. This is a new rendering of building A. Wanted to include this. This one's new. This is building B. More elevations of B. And then this is just our site plan in black and white. So super excited about the project, really happy to be here, and thank you guys very much for the opportunity. And that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it, Sean.
I think he shortened mine by quite a bit here, so this will be good. Okay, so I'm going to cover the next 3 items on the agenda. I'm going to cover the incentive agreements too, the sales tax and the impact fee agreement and the MDA, all in this presentation. So 3 separate motions, but 1 presentation here. So as Sean stated, location, 134th, Mountain View Corridor. It's a prime location. We've been anticipating this development at this location with the Towne Center PUD that was approved some time ago. And so the items we're going to be looking at tonight, like I said, master development agreement covers basically how the site develops. The impact fee agreement is an incentive agreement discussing the impact fees, and the sales tax agreement we briefly discussed in the CDA meeting, but we'll go over that in a little bit more detail here. So this area, as I said, is part of the Towne Center. The corner, this is a plan, kind of blown up area showing what was anticipated back in 2008, 2009 when this area was being conceptually drawn out. Keep in mind, Mountain View Corridor wasn't constructed then. Herriman was probably 8,000 people, so a lot has changed since then. The uses, this is a sheet out of the MDA. They've broken the site into 3 zones. There's the zone 3, which is the big box anchor, and then zone 2 includes the restaurant pads and the junior anchor or junior retail, and then the residential in zone 1. And one thing I want to point out is the parking ratio. In the staff report, we talked about a parking study. I got with Bryce and we talked a little bit about the parking requirements. We got in the ITE manual. That manual identifies 1.31 stalls per unit for weekday parking requirements. And in the MU2 zone, which this is located, there's an automatic 5% reduction allowed. And so if you apply that 5%, it comes down to 1.25. So we decided, instead of having a parking study done, putting 1.25 into the MDA as a minimum, and then as they develop, and they'll market will drive. They do have an opportunity to share parking down into the parking lot near buildings A and B and the CVS, and so they could expand above 1.25 if necessary by having a shared parking agreement for that. So the main concern is parking on the street. We have bike lanes and no shoulders in that area, and so we feel like the plan that went to the Planning Commission had 1.0 stalls per unit. And so as we got discussing, 1.25 made staff feel a bit more comfortable with the parking requirements in the area. So that is a change in the MDA from what was in the packet. And lastly, the access for this site, we have pretty adequate access, a couple of access points off of 134th. To note, the access 1 will include a new signal, an island that'll allow it to be a 3/4 access, which means there's left ins to the north and south and right in, right out, but there's no left outs of the center. So you'll have to go up to 4 and go out to get on Mountain View Corridor, or come around on 3 to turn left to get to turn left out onto 134 if you need to go that way. And then item 2, or access 2 is a right in, right out, and 3 and 4 are full accesses. Some of the highlights, Sean kind of hit on these, so I don't really need to say much more. We've been talking about this for a while, so I think everyone's aware of the importance of this site and the anticipation we've been having for it. Some of the things we showed is renderings of the box, the big box, and buildings A and B. The gathering area kind of makes a sense of place for this development. And one thing that wasn't mentioned is the signage plan. They have a pretty detailed signage plan included in the MDA, and I just took a couple of the signs. They have the one out on Mountain View Corridor, and it'll be fairly tall and prominent, so it'll be able to be seen, good advertisement, good visibility. And then the really cool curved entrance signs as you enter the site off of 134th, kind of identifying where you're at and letting you know where you need to go. Another thing that's kind of cool is the site has some wayfinding signs inside too. If you've looked through the packet into that deep of the MDA, kind of showing the residences, so it's pedestrian friendly too, to help people find their way if they're coming out of the residential area and coming down, want to know where a certain store is, they can find it. This is kind of a detail of the island I talked about on 134. We've reached out to Riverton City because half of this is Riverton, and they've been pretty responsive. We still haven't met with them yet, but it'll help out with the safety and enhance access for all this area with this development going in. Okay, so the impact fee agreement, this one, the city, with the agreement, if approved, the city would not collect the impact fees from the developer on this site. However, when building permits are submitted and calculated, the amount for the transportation, water, storm drain, and park, whatever one applies, will be calculated and then counted as a credit to the overall incentive to the developer. So these are just estimates. As we get the building permits coming in, we'll be able to get the better number, but that's where we're estimating it would be at. And then the sales tax agreement. This little exhibit shows how the local option sales tax works. And so half of the 1%, as Councilman Henderson explained earlier, a little bit is kept in the city, the point of sale, we call it post. And so half of that is proposed to be shared with the developer for a term of 20 years or until the maximum aggregate amount that's in the agreement is reached. And then it also says it can extend until that amount is reached. And so with the impact fees and the participation agreement that was already approved with the TIF and the sales tax, that makes up the entire incentive package for this development. So that is all the information I had, and I just highlighted the point of sale. And be happy to answer any questions you have. Got some pretty pictures that Sean showed, so it kind of worked together. You can look at them again, but I'll answer any questions you have, or the developer is here as well, as you know, so he can answer questions too.
Okay?
I got a few questions about the agreement, the MDA.
Okay?
A couple of the commercial uses under Section D. It lists bank or financial institutions. I think we've talked about that as a council on several occasions. I'm not opposed to that, but I'd like to limit that to maybe just one bank or financial institution on the property there. It seems like all we ever get in the city is, you know, credit unions and banks and dentist offices, and we just don't really need a lot more of those. So, you know, we can talk about, I got a couple of the questions. One is, what is construction services? Listed as a commercial use. I'm not sure that I know what that is.
John, go ahead and yeah.
I got it, okay. And then I'm not, a convenience store just doesn't seem to be in harmony with the quality and the aesthetics of the overall development. And so I'm wondering if you guys would have any opposition to taking C-stores out of the permitted uses there.
We probably would be hesitant to do that. I mean, if the box were to get into some type of C-store type operations in the future, we just wouldn't want to get into.
Could we make it a conditional use instead of permitted use there?
Possibly.
It's just,
You want to call it an accessory use, maybe?
yeah, I mean, if a big box retailer is going to do something like that and put that in, I think we'd probably be supportive of that. If it's 7-Eleven on the corner, I'm not so sure that's the kind of thing we'd love to see there.
So as a conditional use, we would just kind of need to go through a process to.
What about the accessory use? Because if we were doing accessory use, it would have to be tied to
Accessory is
another.
more what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And what you're
So it could be
describing.
tied, so you wouldn't even have to come back through a process if we did an accessory use. So if the retailer wanted to do then it's okay. It's not, couldn't be a standalone necessarily, but it could be tied to the main.
One of the other, so like the big box, if they want to put gas pumps in a C-store out front, it'd have to be part of their operation.
I know we're so sensitive to trying to limit our uses because we just don't know how these retailers are going to evolve, you know, over the years. So we are hesitant to limit ourselves. We have no plans for a C-store today, but in the future, it's just very hard to predict, you know, could that happen down the road? It probably could. And so just, I'm hesitant to limit it.
Well, that does give us some pause, right? As we're being sold what's on the screen, we want to have some assurity that that's what's going to happen. So understand, this is the phrase I've used for 12 years now, your flexibility is our uncertainty, right? So if we're selling it to our residents, that we're going to incentivize what you're seeing on the screen and what they get as a 7-Eleven down the road, we're not doing our jobs very well either. So I think what we're proposing is a middle ground, right? So if it's an accessory use to, say, the big box or one of these users, that means that it's in coordination with their main location there. We really would not want to see a standalone convenience store in this project.
Could we do both? Could we have it as an accessory, is permitted, and do the others a conditional, where they just have to come back through and?
Conditional means it can happen, it just has to go through a process, right? And which really is, the process is to mitigate any nuisances, more or less, right? Conflicting uses. But if we're wanting an upscale project, standalone. And that's what gives me pause, is we're being asked for 20 or even longer period of time for these financial incentives, right? If we're going to do that, then we need some assurance that what we're seeing is what's gonna happen. That's kind of implicit in the deal, I would think.
Could we do the accessory and the conditional?
And just to mention that the development agreement only controls for a certain amount of time. Once the development agreement expires, it's going to revert back to the underlying zone. So if a C-store is allowed in the underlying zone, then they would be able to do that.
The underlying zone is MU2. It's a conditional use in the MU2 zone.
So,
Or gas
just some
stations.
context.
A C-store, I think, is allowed, but a gas station is a conditional use.
And that's a good point, because what we're talking about is a master development agreement.
Right.
Right, versus the zoning, so
How long's the
that
master?
speaks to the point that we're making, is we're making this agreement for this period of time for this project, right? If it goes beyond the scope, the time period of this agreement, then it would revert to the zoning.
I mean, there's, 50, 60 uses on here. I'm not trying to pinch any of the uses or restrict your development plans, but the reason I'm bringing it up is that it doesn't seem to jive with the aesthetic of the development. A C-store doesn't fit with the pictures that we're seeing and the images that are being created. And so that's why I wouldn't want to see that detract from the overall project. I see it as a distraction, and I'm just one vote, but that's how I see it.
Well,
So
I even, if you compare it to your other projects that you've listed on here, I'm not seeing that in those. I'm not seeing C-stores and 7-Eleven gas stations in those.
Harmon's does have a gas
Harmon's has
station
one.
component, so.
Harmon,
That's an
it's
accessory,
part of,
yes.
it's an accessory.
Yeah, which I
Is-
think there
which
is
is what we'd
some
be
middle
okay.
ground,
Yeah.
so I think maybe the accessory could get us there. I think the conditional use, I think that's probably fair too.
Yeah.
So open to those.
yeah,
I like the accessory. I mean,
the accessory I'm good with. The conditional use, if the underlying zone, I don't know, I need to think about that for a sec. But
I mean, that would kick in, what's the duration of the MDA again? 15. It's 15, so if it's beyond
or
15.
we can extend it beyond 15 if we should. But
I mean, if this doesn't come out of the ground, so, sorry, I'm gonna back up just a little bit, right? So when we go through these things, what we've tasked our legal advisors with is we want the MDA to give us some assurances that what we're seeing here is what happens. So the pretty pictures and the descriptions, the legal document needs to tie that in and make sure we're getting what we're seeing. And if we run beyond the period of that agreement and it hasn't been built for whatever reason, then the market's dictating something else, at that point, I don't care if it reverts to just the general zoning. In that case, we've all failed, right, to make this project happen.
Because we're putting a lot of tax incentive money on the line for
30
this
$35
project.
million.
Not for a bunch of standalone gas stations or C-stores, but for this type of project, because we believe, like you believe, it's gonna bring in the kind of tax revenue that's gonna warrant those kinds of incentives for you and for us, for our citizens.
Are you okay with an accessory then, Sean?
Yes, I think we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another question I had is under, it continues under section D, subsection 2. So this would be on page 6 of the agreement. It says dwelling group. It says notwithstanding the foregoing, the residential portion may, following the initial development thereof, be utilized for one or more hotels or similar hospitality uses. I'd have a real concern with 300 residential uses plus a hotel on that residential property. That seems way too much there. So I could see an either or some kind of, hybrid-ish. If there's a hotel, it's less units or something like that.
Yeah,
but-
I don't think the intention was 300 units plus the hotel. I think it was,
Or,
if it was like kind of a cumulative, if that were to change in the future.
Yeah, and again, I actually think there could be a nice use for a hotel right there. Like that's not a bad utility, but I think if there's a hotel there, I'd like to see less residential units there.
Yeah, I think,
So I don't know how we can wordsmith that maybe, Todd, I'd leave that to you, but the way I read it right now, it says you could do the units plus the hotel.
The only way you could get it on that piece of land is to go vertical.
I don't think that was the intention, to do both.
Yeah.
So open to clarifying that.
Great, and
Yeah.
I just like to have it worded somewhere that it's kind of an either-or thing, you know?
I'd take a hotel. Any way we can get it. I'll change
You want to build
whatever.
that, or we're good to
You can
go?
have a convenience store if you put a hotel.
I had a question on the above portion of that too, in section A. This is on the top of page 3. The residential portion identified as Zone 1 covers approximately 6.64 acres of the property and shall initially have no more than 300 units. I have a problem with initially. It should just say shall have no more than 300 units. Do you,
I think that's our intention too,
okay,
is the maximum of 300.
so just strike initially.
Okay. Anything else on
The
this
rest
one?
was pretty straightforward. There's not a lot in there that caused me any concerns. I
Yep.
just was the uses, and then that number of units and the hotel kind of thing.
Okay.
The one thing we didn't comment, though, was that bank or financial institution. I'd really like to limit the number of those there.
Are you okay with just having one of those?
I think we might need 2.
I'm not sure that you can find 2 banks or credit unions that don't already exist in Herriman that are allowed in the state.
That could be true.
Oh,
Yeah, see, that's it.
That's
That
different
might be
than a
called a
bank.
brokerage service.
Yeah,
You could say one bank or credit union. I don't know.
yeah, maybe.
Call that
I
out.
guess that's what I'd say. A bank or a credit union, I would classify differently than
Financial
what you're
services.
describing as, you know, a Fidelity or a Schwab office or something like that, you know. I don't know, what are you guys' thoughts? Am I walking the plank here? Because I'm just
No.
like, I'm out on the limb, but.
Well, they show restaurants on a lot of them, but I'm not super opposed to it in that we know both of them have to pay property
Yeah, they do
taxes.
pay property taxes,
Yeah,
and that's
I mean,
great.
in the totality of this project, I'm not overly concerned, right? The market dictates a lot.
Yeah.
Where our, and I'll agree with Steve, where our collective concern comes from is that we seem to get a lot of service-oriented businesses that don't generate the sales tax. And I know that there's I call it the financial ecosystem, right? You've got these different places play off of each other, and you have tenants that like to be next to others, totally recognize that, but especially with the incentives offered, hopefully they're incentivized enough to get that commercial sales tax. Service-oriented businesses don't produce any. So we have a lot of those throughout our city, and we're really hurting for the commercial sales tax part of it, so.
Yeah, and I guess that, to your point, that should help motivate you guys to get more sales tax generators in there because it benefits you the same it does us. It gets us to that number a lot faster than if we have.
So to answer your question, Steve, personally, I do.
Again,
I think that the
I'm
market
only
will
one-
kind of
I'm only
dictate.
one vote, and it's just something that we have discussed as we've looked at other commercial things. We've talked about even changing zoning regulations that limit the amount or the proximity of ones to others. Like, this is not a new issue that we've discussed or considered.
If we can separate bank and credit union specifically from other financial services, like I would love to see that sort of.
are you okay with that, Sean? If we were to do one bank or credit union, and then you could have another, like a Fidelity in there, that wouldn't count towards a bank?
This one's a little tougher maybe.
It's a tough one. I think
And I don't want it to be a deal breaker either, because there is a there's a market component, right, that's gonna drive it.
Yeah, it's just that there's not,
And the sales tax, they've got the sales tax that they
So-
need to recoup.
So
what
Chris,
are there, 5 outbuildings, 6 outbuildings?
There's 6 total.
you're saying you want to keep the same definition with the limit of 2? I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Because the other way would be is we single out bank and credit union, and they can still do another
Could we
financial.
limit one of the outbuilding, just like only one standalone, I mean, there's only 6 pads there, you know what I mean? You got the big retail center and all that stuff, but there's only 6 pads, and if one of the, or 2 of those are a bank or a credit union, we've taken 1/3 of the tax generating opportunity there. And that's the part that's what our whole opposition to this has been. And just backstory, we've literally had discussions about saying no more banks or credit unions in the city. Like just outlawing them completely or making them, you have to be 6 miles apart or something, you know. It's just not, it's not an appealing amenity in a city that has so many of them already. I mean, we're a city of 60,000 and we've got how many, I don't know, 10, 9 or 10 banks already? I mean, it's a lot. It's just, I mean, one corner over here, there's what, 4 of them within, 300 yards of each other, so.
But again, devil's advocate, Steve, they need the tax revenue as much as, I mean, they need it to generate as well. My guess is their goal is not to have any because they need, but they want the option.
So, and the way I'm thinking about, I'm okay with keeping the definition and limiting to 2. That to me, that accomplishes the same thing as limiting it to 1 bank or credit union and allowing another financial whatever.
Because then that couldn't be in the other, I mean, then.
Right. So it accomplishes the same thing. So I really like that. Going back to
That's
the other
true.
point, looking at the configuration of the buildings, there is that ecosystem, right? Somebody goes to the ATM, they're going to spend money in the other stores that are right around it. The other financial services would be a Fidelity or a Schwab or somebody like me that has their office in one of those buildings. So I'm good with limiting it to 2.
Good with
Yep.
limiting it to 2.
Limited to 2 then? You're okay with that?
So that's 1 bank or credit union and then 1 financial institution?
We're
Or
just
two
saying, we're
financial-
just saying 2
We're just gonna
financial
keep the same
institutions.
definition and just limit
Yep.
it to 2.
So, just to clarify, we're saying 2 banks, but financial services is kind of a separate service?
No, we're gonna keep the same definition, right? They're all the same thing.
So then we couldn't do a Fidelity or a Charles Schwab or,
Combination of them equals 2.
the private practice financial planner.
As long as there's not 2 other banks out there. So we're saying 2 financial institutions, meaning 2, whether it be a bank or credit union or a Charles Schwab or we're just saying 2, no more than 2 in the development.
If you have 2 banks and a financial planner
That's
in
3.
this particular thing, that's 3 service-oriented businesses, not retail-oriented
Where does
businesses.
financial?
And I just,
We do think Fidelity is could be a real possibility, so.
Right. That's cool.
There's one, and then
Or financial institution.
I understand the city's opposition to banks and financial services, but we're just trying not to pigeonhole ourselves.
Do you anticipate more than 2 banks?
I don't think so.
So that's what we're saying. We're saying 1 bank anywhere out front, and then you could have another Charles Schwab or a Fidelity in there. Or you could do 2 banks and no Fidelity, if that makes sense. Because there's 18 total users I'm counting. If we were to do 3 financial institutions, I mean, from us, understand from our,
Percentage.
that's a big percent of the whole development would be 3.
And part of the issue with the definitions is, just been told, is that we started with our list of permitted uses, and you guys have added a bunch of subcategories that is causing us to then to go look at those.
Because it says bank or financial institution, and then it's banking services. It's listed twice.
Right.
essentially.
Are you okay with,
And business professional and financial consulting station. That's again another list.
that's another category.
Right.
Are you trying to limit just the out parcels or buildings A and B too? Because maybe financial planner would go into buildings A and B in one of the
Yeah, so.
things in there,
A
so-
financial planner in there seems like a great fit. I actually like that idea. That's a cool,
to need out here?
yeah, I mean, I
don't know
think
of anything.
it'd be really,
Any of my
Good,
clients are
a
watching,
good
I'm
addition.
not paying to have an office there. It's not
but
happening.
but it's the 6 out pads I just don't want those I just, turn them into banks is just, if it's not needed in the community, it doesn't generate sales tax revenue, and I'm
It's a
not saying
cons-
it's a detraction from it, but we're really looking for a retail development.
It's a concern because we're kind of overrun with them, so our surrounding areas, Riverton, are coming over here to see their brick and mortar bank and then going back over there to spend money.
The proposal would be a maximum of 2 banks or credit unions on the 6 outparcel buildings.
Or the mayor mentioned all 18. You counted all the users.
Yeah.
So I guess that's really where council, what do you want?
Are we asking for 2 financial users total? Is that what we're asking for in the total project? I'm trying to understand, I'm just trying to end,
That was where I was.
okay.
I think we could live with the maximum of 2 banks on the outparcels, but 2 tenants total is probably too restrictive.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing is 2 banks plus a
Right.
plus a financial planner, and that's, 20% of the project.
Well, no, because are you saying that on the outpads that you'd limit the banks and you wouldn't allow a financial planner to be on that?
That's where I was going with it, is
separate
you
pads.
have financial planning allowed. If you wanted to go above the 2, there was only 2 allowed on the outparcels. If you wanted another 1 or whatever, they would be in,
It's still the 20% though.
Yeah, that's the whole point, is I
1/6.
don't want 3 of them out there. I don't want 2, really, but
Not in
I
buildings A
would
or B.
take one of the pads and then one other spot in the, the A or B buildings over there. But I personally can't support 2 banks on the pads and then another financial spot in there as well. That's just not, I'm not on board with that, so. But that's just me.
Okay, let's think about that. Let's come back to anything else, right, unless that's the last. Is that the last?
On those, did you want to talk about the?
Let's come back to that then.
Tax
Let us,
This is the MDA issue in front of you right
Right.
now.
right.
But we're talking about all 3 of them at the same time, right?
Well,
Or no?
you'll have motions on the other ones separately.
I know, but-
I just
It's
presented.
not
You
tied,
just presented them all.
it's not tied
Yeah,
to
let's
this one.
get this through this one first then.
I kind of, go ahead. I think we are, yeah. We're good with the 1.25 parking number adjustment?
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the 2, my thoughts were limiting it to 2 in the entire project, right? The idea of having, you've got 6 outbuildings and 2, I kind of leaning back with Steve on that one.
That's a compromise I would be willing to accept, 2 in the whole project. But the idea of 2 of those 6 pads being banks.
Yeah, that's instantly is depressing to me.
No, me too. And that's why I'm bringing it up, is it's just one of those things where.
I guess I'm, again, looking at your other developments, is that you have 2 banks and a financial planning place in your other developments also? But, yeah, that's more like finance.
There's a Chase of B of A over just across the street over there,
There's a
right?
Chase. Is there B of A also there?
Right by the Zupas, yeah.
So the market's going to dictate it. Yes, they are users that are active.
But it is also a much bigger footprint over there as far as stores also.
Look, if I were a bank, I think about what these retail centers could be, seems like a cool place to be, right? A lot of people are going to be there, a lot of traffic going by. It's on a huge major corner, great visibility. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I would want.
Kind
And
of.
that's
I
what
haven't
concerns me.
I haven't set foot in a bank in I don't know how long. Now, I don't understand. I don't even use ATMs anymore.
But they have to have, it's Community Reinvestment Act stuff. They have to have brick and mortar in an area that they want to do specific lending in. So it's important to have that. So, anyway, I think I've beat that horse to death from
So it's a no on you. You need to have more than two. You need to have two banks and a financial deal, or, I mean, if we're saying we just want two.
Two tenants for the whole project is just too prescriptive. I don't think we would want to do that.
Okay. Are there any other issues that were needed to?
We're thinking, Sean, we're thinking. I promise we're not trying to be, you know where we're coming from too? Do you kind of understand where we're coming from?
Okay. So suggestion was if we were to limit one bank or credit union to the 6 outbuildings, I'm sorry, I don't know how you can go ahead and speak in the microphone, but there could be a bank in the anchor tenant, right? Like you see with a lot of those, and there could be one in the, for lack of a better term, the strip mall
Accessory
part.
use I'm cool with, right? Like if it's in the big box retailer, or even, you know, that kind of thing, like I'm not opposed to that at all. What I just don't want to see is these really valuable parcels out here, these pods that are just like golden gems, like just something so desirable and so needed in our city. This is like, I mean, this is gonna be the bomb, right? This is the one, and I'd hate to see those parcels taken up with a bank.
So if we limit it to one on a pad and then
But 3 overall?
two elsewhere,
Yeah, I could go with that.
how would you guys be with that? Yeah, if we said you're limited to one on a pad, and then you could have upwards of 3, but the other 2 would have to be somewhere besides a pad.
So one could be an accessory inside your retail. One could be
Or in
Those
this other
strip thing.
strip.
in the strip.
There. I understand, and I made this comment. But I understand the sentiment.
Go with a square footage requirement of 10,000 square feet,
What's the total square foot of the,
215,000.
Well, that's, I mean, the average size of those buildings is, yeah.
I'm okay with it.
The average of those outbuildings are 5, so.
Some are 5, some are 13.
The smaller ones are
One's what,
5-ish.
43 or whatever, so you could still do 2 out there, and that's, look, I'm willing to compromise, but I would just say this as kind of my final position on this. This is going to be one of the more desirable developments, retail developments in the area. It is, with the discussions about some of the potential retailers that could be there, I think there are going to be huge draws. And I would not want to pass up the opportunity to not only, number one, bring in a desirable amenity into the community, i.e. a restaurant, a specialty store, something like that, right? Clother, you know, something like that. And I wouldn't like to limit the number of banks and credit unions and financial institutions that are coming into the city because it's just overkill. And I've been pretty consistent about that for a couple of years, saying we should do that. If there's a way to preserve those outbuildings primarily for retail businesses, restaurants, specialty stores, that kind of thing, that's what I'd love to see there. That would be the most desirable thing. I understand from a development position, you guys have money out and invested, you need to be able to get it back, and that flexibility allows you to make transactions that allow you to close deals and move on and do other developments. I understand and I applaud you guys for doing what you do. I'm not here to mess up your ability to make a profit and execute your plan quickly. But I'm also representing the city of Herriman and its residents, as well as you guys as landowners and developers here, to look over the needs and interests of the community over the long term. And a quick turn of a restaurant or a soda shop or a bank or a soda shop or a drive-through coffee place or something, it's just not, it doesn't go in harmony with what I see this development being, and it's just not a needed an amenity. And I would hate to see those go there and take away something that could be much better. That's my.
So I think he's putting out a compromise. I think he's putting out a square foot compromise. I go back to the original point too. They're going to want retail to pay themselves back. I mean, the faster they do that, I'm thinking, what I'm guessing in previous conversation, they don't want to limit themselves long. Their preference is going to be retail as well. But they also don't want to they don't want to get themselves too pigeonholed long-term if things change. And that's why I think a square footage.
But the problem is we don't have a time limit on that. So if it takes 35 years, it takes 35 years. They'll still get the money. That's the problem. Does that make sense?
No, I get it, yeah.
So they can make their money back quickly by getting a tenant in there. And if it doesn't produce enough revenue quickly, it's okay, they'll get it back over time.
So are you not okay with the 20,000 square feet? Because that's less than 10,000 square feet. See, that's less than 5% of the total project.
Can you do 10,000 square feet
Yeah.
and only one of the boxes, one of the pads?
Again, I would not expect them to all be restaurants. I could see maybe 2, possibly a third. But I think you're more likely to have one of these standalone special clubs, like
I think
an Old
really
Navy or something, or
our fear
Men's Warehouse
is
or something.
we have all 4 pads spoken for. The last 2, the only demand there is from financial users, and we're prevented from doing the rest of the deals. That's the fear.
And 10,000, to be fair, if we're saying 10, we were okay with 2.
So
Now we're saying 10,000 square feet. That's 2 of your pads. The rest of it then cannot be. It's no different, and to me, that's a fair compromise.
said
That's
in
the
the
same.
first
The
place.
reason what we said was 2, so I'm okay with 10,000 square foot. I'm just saying,
I think that's a
are you okay with that?
the 4 pads that you kind of quote unquote have spoken for, can you identify those for me on?
Or is that just
That
hypothetically?
was just hypothetical. Like, because if we limit ourselves today and then the market speaks and then we're prevented from doing deals because we're capped out on a certain use, that's the fear.
10,000, and I think, like you said, Steve, 10,000 is the same as 2 pads, which we were okay with.
And I guess you also probably just hinted a little bit of a restriction that you have also in that you are dealing with some other, your big box and things like that. They're going to have requirements that are going to dictate what can and cannot go there. So if we want those big boxers, then we have to compromise on the other end. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Give me just 1 second when I look at something real quick here.
I mean, for the record, I'm okay with the 10,000.
I might be, I just want to look at something real quick here.
Do need to specify, though, is that 10,000 square feet of financial services in general, all categories?
Yes.
She's saying yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great compromise then.
I did
Are
too.
you okay with that, Sean? You're good? Okay.
Let me just look.
I think that's the same. I think it's the same thing we started with.
But it gives.
We're gonna get there, I
it gives
promise.
them-
We wanna
it gives
get
them
there.
flexibility for it.
5,000.
At the same time, giving us some certainty.
Yes.
Drive-through's already established. Half of that corner. since those are listed, bank.
Food or bank, food or bank.
Like it, but the drive-throughs are built in. That, I mean, that's half of that corner could be banks.
For sure. I mean, if we agree to two, we agree to two, and it's gonna be probably
Yep.
those two.
That's what I'm saying, it's no different than what we agreed with. Okay, I think we're,
And that's 9,000 square feet. That would be right where the map right here, you know? So if we're saying, you know,
but then the rest of it would be
And,
retail
but
then.
it's not just necessarily bank, it could be a Fidelity, it can be something financial.
it's not gonna be.
All right, we ready?
Yep, let's do it. Make that motion, Jared.
All right, so, well, do you want me to just read those, or do you want to? All right, so the attorney's gonna read kind of the changes that we made, right? And then I'll make my motion in accordance to that.
That parking for Zone 1, which is the residential, shall be set at a maximum of 1.25 stalls per unit.
Is that a maximum or a minimum?
Minimum, sorry. The convenience store shall only be permitted as an accessory use. Clarify that if a hotel is located on the property, the residential units will be reduced. Probably need to figure out what it's reduced to. Strike initially from section 5.A.2 that Sherry brought up. And banking services, which I would classify as banks and credit unions, and financial services shall have a maximum floor space of 10,000 square feet for the whole project.
Yes, Chris, come on up, come on. Yep, come on up.
I want to make sure that the big box, if they were to do a financial institution in that, doesn't affect our 10,000 square foot aggregate number.
I'm okay with that, too.
I can put that in there. I think it's good clarification. I would probably put banking services as
'Cause
an
honestly, in my
accessory,
opinion, if they-
is a permitted accessory
have
use
one in there-
to, is that zone 3?
Because if they,
The
honestly, if
big
there's one
box
in there,
to
I
zone
think it
3?
limits the possibility of them outside, honestly.
Maybe.
Okay. Yes, so we will clarify that,
Okay.
10,000 plus one, an accessory inside.
Perfect, thank you.
That's a big one.
Yep.
So I'm going to do this
Yep.
and then point to him again.
Okay.
So a motion to approve resolution number R44-2024, approving a master development agreement with Elevated Acquisitions LLC for a project located at approximately 4850 West, 13400 South, with the changes described by the city attorney.
I like that, okay. Motion by Jared, second by Sherry. This is a roll call. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay, and Teddy has dropped off. He's let me know he's dropped off, and I will vote yes on that. So that motion carries 4-0. Okay, any other, so now let's do 11.2 on the impact fee agreement. Any further discussion on the impact fee agreement?
I did just have one question. In the MDA, and I think as part of this, we're saying that they're not going to be subject to any of these fees, right? But we're going to give them offset credit for these fees, is that?
We're getting offset credit for it, yeah.
I want to make sure I understand exactly how that's working. So if we're not,
Not a waiver. So it's an offset credit.
So if it were,
because in the MDA language, which we just approved, it says in there, sorry, let me find that paragraph again. Here. On page 8, section 9B, subsection 3, impact fees. It says the applicant's current development plan shall not be subject to any impact fees, other contributions of land, or cash in lieu thereof, the waiver of which shall be set forth in greater detail in a certain impact fee agreement.
Which is what you're,
Yeah, and so that's what I'm trying to figure out, is that if they're not subject to them and we're calling it a waiver, I'm are we comfortable that the language we have in place, and I guess this is for Todd, effectively achieves what it is that we're saying we're trying to do here?
I think we could add a sentence clarifying that any of the impact fees we would normally charge is going to be credited to that amount.
That's what I want to get to. I don't want to make it so that we're giving a credit based on nothing, it seems like, right? I want to tie it to, we're giving a credit for what the impact fees that would have normally been charged that we are not going to be charging, if that makes sense. So I think
It specifically says waiver, and it's not a waiver.
Yeah.
So that wording does need to be cleaned up.
So I think I would do that in this impact fee agreement, just spell that out. Since the MDA says we're not doing it per this agreement, we can amend this agreement. So I'd look to Todd where that sentence would be added.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, again, I'm sorry, guys, to go into, I mean, this is minute details, but we have been through MDAs up to our eyeballs in the last several years, and this fine-tooth comb stuff usually is what comes back to bite us if we don't
And then
correct
10 years
it, so.
later, the next people sitting in your chairs go, well, that's not what it says.
Okay.
Good if I do this
So we
one
good
the
with that?
same way?
Yeah, I'm trying
We'll
to
let Jared make all
work
the
on
motions today,
language.
because he's going to point to.
Blake, credited to, what would be the appropriate?
Credited to the total aggregate amount identified in the sales tax and participation agreements.
Incentive.
Waiver is not the term, but it's not collected.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to, is I think we know what we want to happen. I'm just not sure the language lines up with that. That's what I'd like to
Yeah, we don't have any problem with the process.
No problem with the process.
We just want to make sure
the
it's spelled out
language is
correctly.
They'll be calculated the same way and applied to the incentive.
Yeah, that's what I just want to belt and suspender that a little bit, so.
Okay, this is the language that I have. Clarify that any impact fees that would normally be charged for this project would be credited to the total aggregate amount in the sales tax incentive agreement.
Specific to transportation, water, stormwater, and park. Because we still will collect police and fire, and then the other districts will collect.
For transportation,
Yeah, that's another thing we probably need to talk about, that is it says, shall not be subject to any impact fees in the MDA, but they are subject to public safety impact fees, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we need to correct that too.
And that's, this agreement the impact agreement specifically calls that out. I guess we would have to reopen your MDA if you want to correct it there. I didn't catch that when we were doing that, so I apologize.
That's an issue, because we just approved that MDA.
Yes, it is.
And it says no impact fees.
I think you can, under Robert's rules, for a newly passed ordinance, you can reopen it because nothing's been signed. And we can make that clarification. I'm assuming that the applicants are okay with that.
Okay,
We need a motion to
make a
open that.
motion that we reopen item 11.1
Okay,
for some further modifications.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So, page 8, section 9B, subsection 3, under impact fees. It currently reads, the applicant's current development plan shall not be subject to any impact fees. And we need to correct that to accurately reflect which impact fees they will be subject to, and then which impact fees will be credited to them on the reimbursement side.
We point to this agreement.
Probably should say they're subject to them, but we're not going to collect them per this other agreement. We're going to credit them back. As we're talking about the way this agreement is working, I think I looked at Todd, but the intent is to say, yes, they would be, this is what you would pay, but we're not charging those. Those are towards that total incentive package.
Yeah.
So in that, sorry, which page is that, Steve?
Page 8 of the MDA.
Get to it, I think.
273 of the whole packet.
Impact fees, okay. Can we just change it to, it shall be subject to the impact fees as described in the impact fee agreement?
Yep, that's what I have.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes,
Yeah, I like that.
that a lot
Okay.
better. Are you guys okay with that? Okay.
All right.
And then in the impact fee agreement, we would clarify which impact fees we're crediting to the sales tax incentive agreement.
This has come up before. We probably need to say the ones the city charges, because there are other districts like sewer that are going to, I don't know if they will, but we don't control that, so we shouldn't be.
Yeah, wait a minute, we're crediting.
Subject to,
Yeah, and we're on the same page. We just don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot, preventing us the ability to collect the impact fees that we are agreeing to.
so my wording is, will be subject to, oh shoot, I just had it in my brain a second ago. Will be subject to the impact fees that the city collects as described in the subsequent impact fee agreement.
Yeah, and then in that agreement, we will say, these are the ones we're collecting, these are the ones we're not collecting.
And they're credited towards.
Yeah.
Yep. There's Muds?
City collects.
We're not collecting them, they'll be counted towards the incentive package, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll try this motion again. So now a motion to approve resolution number R44-2024, approving a master development agreement with Elevated Acquisitions LLC for a project located at approximately 4850 West, 13400 South, with the changes described by the city attorney, including the most recent change in the section regarding impact fees to be that this MDA will be subject to the impact fees that the city collects as described in the subsequent impact fee agreement.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. New motion, new second, all in favor? Oh, no, roll call. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. So that new motion is now approved. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Good catch.
Yes, thank you. So now 11-2, are we okay for a motion on 11-2 then?
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. Jared, you're making the motion since you're down by Todd today.
Okay.
Scroll down here.
Okay, so just to clarify, Blake, transportation, stormwater, and water? And parks. Okay, I have clarified that any impact fees that the city would collect for this project would be credited to the total aggregate amount in the sales tax incentive agreement related to transportation, stormwater, water, and park impact fees.
Other city-related impact fees will be collected. Do we need to add that, or is that implicit in that
So in the
description?
current agreement, I think it's page 350 of the whole thing.
Yeah,
It
that's
does
what
say,
It calls those.
it says we will not collect those for transportation, water, storm drain, park. So we do call it out there in the actual agreement. And I think that actually gets to a lot, tied with the change you made in the MDA. I think it clarifies what we're going to credit them.
Okay, let me
Not
get,
collect A, B, C, D. Yeah, okay. That's what I
so
thought.
we should be good with
We
it
should be good with that
as
language.
is
Yep.
then.
Okay, I have a motion on the table.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Jared?
Did we motion to?
I don't think we
I don't
made
think
a
we have a
Oh,
motion
you
on
did
this yet.
motion? I thought you made a
No.
motion. Oh, we were just clarifying that.
We're just
Yes, sorry.
clarifying.
Okay.
So the motion now is motion to approve resolution number R45-2024, approving an impact fee agreement between Herriman City and Elevated Acquisitions LLC.
I'll second.
Motion by Jared, second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion as well carries. 11.3, consideration of a sales tax incentive agreement with Elevated Acquisitions to facilitate infrastructure and site improvements associated with the commons at Herriman Towne Center. Any further discussion on this item?
Did you want to go there,
Oh,
Blake?
okay.
You'll do your presentation?
Oh, he's just putting it
No.
up.
So there were two major items, I think, that we were discussing in between meetings, different conversations came up. So what was on the material we saw earlier was 50% for 20 years. We had talked about the total amount, the dollar amount, and I don't see a dollar amount referenced. Just in the, so up to that total dollar amount, and then that agreement would terminate upon whichever comes first, right? So if it's $11 million, if they got to that point in year 11, then that agreement ends. If it goes to a maximum of 20 years and they only collected 9, then we're reached the maximum time limit and that agreement ends.
That used a term in there of premature expiry or something like that?
Yeah.
Which meant, and then it automatically extended until the dollar amount was met. So there really is no time limit, essentially, by the way.
So
that's
that was a difference from what was kind of originally presented, but that's what's in the actual documents is an automatic extension.
Yeah, it's on page 360 of the whole packet, but it's section B there of section 3B of the agreement, where it talks about the total amount of the aggregate limit agreed to be 37 million, rounded off, right? Unless the city or the agency requests additive change orders to the improvements or the construction, Then we'll modify the increment limit to provide for the reimbursement of any changes that we make. It says, however, notwithstanding the 20-year term of the agreement, the parties do hereby agree the developer would not have been able to undertake the project absent public participation. B, it is possible, well, I guess that would be an A. It is possible that the facility providing funding under the, we probably need to clean this up a little bit, under the agreement will terminate prior to receipt by developer of the aggregate limit, with such event being known as a premature expiry. And in the event of a premature expiry, the term will be extended such that the developer will be able to recover an amount equal to the shortfall. So it's basically saying this is a 100-year agreement if it needs be to pay them back the 37 million.
Well, for them to collect 37 million.
Yeah, collect 37 million.
Which I think we all have heartburn on that one. I mean, most of these agreements that we've done, even with large projects, I think most of them are 15-year agreements. And it is the whichever comes first and it ends. In our conversations, a few things came up. One is kind of the purpose of this for both of us is it's performance-based, right? If you generate the sales tax, then you participate in that. And having the time restriction on it incentivizes you to act on it sooner than later, which is what we desperately need. So having it go on indefinitely kind of does away with any incentive on either end of it. So I don't think any of us are okay with just it's going to automatically extend until the dollar amount we want is collected. So we've been somewhat talking loosely, talking about some alternative compromises. A couple that have been brought up is one on the performance end, the two larger, the main anchor, and then I think it was referred to as the junior anchor. Maybe there's a clause put in that that it will automatically extend if both of those are open and operating by a certain date. The other that we talked about, which I think is, I mean, that might work. I don't know. The other that I think maybe is easier to agree upon is when we reach a certain period, whether it's 15 years or 20 years, I'm fine if we extend it, but that the percentage drops. At that point, the city then needs to be receiving more sales tax. I mean, after a 15 or 20-year period, that incentive needs to switch a little bit. So if the goal is to, no matter what, collect that dollar amount, and the extended time period doesn't matter, then I would suggest that whatever time period we decide on, if it's 15, if it's 20 years, I'm fine if it would automatically extend, but at a declining percentage up to that maximum dollar amount.
That's an interesting idea.
Those are at least the two ideas that a couple of us had talked about. I don't know if anybody else has any others. If you have any.
Yeah, Sean, come up. Yeah, come on up again. Let's.
Yeah.
I think the second option is pretty reasonable. you know, a lower percentage would come back to us after the 20 years. I think, you know, 65, 35 after the 20 years, if we still are needing to hit that aggregate limit, I think that's pretty reasonable.
I'm okay with that, actually.
And I guess, I think it should slide after that even every 5 years. So I think 65, 35 is great, but after 25 years, if we're still not there, then you take another big slide to where you get to the point where you're only making 10% of it if you haven't performed within 30 years. You know what I mean? Because it's a huge time period to perform, because typically this would be in a 15-year time frame. So I just think that it has to continue to slide if we continue to slide out years and years from now. Because the power of money becomes less and less for you guys also, right?
Yeah, and I think we're pretty confident that at 25 years, we're gonna be there. So
Yeah.
to drop it down again is probably reasonable, so.
Can I throw out another
think
crazy
that's
idea?
okay. I think it's,
That's what we're doing.
Welcome to the party.
What if we agreed to a higher percentage of payout with like a 15-year term?
Shorter period. Well, that's kind of the idea,
You know what I
is
mean?
that if you
So
want
we
to.
could pay 65 to you, 35 to us, instead of 50-50. So you get the incentive sooner, and then it gets, but it limits the time frame. So if
Again,
you don't get it
time
done.
value of money, you're just negotiating against us, right? We want to get that money early.
I understand.
We have all of our needs. If you're paying $1 in 30 years, it's quite a bit different than paying $1 today.
Yeah, I don't want to push it. I don't want to go below 50 right now.
And
We're
I
gonna
think
have needs.
from the needs, when we go through our budget,
And I totally understand where you're
Yeah,
going, Steve.
I just was,
I know. No,
On-
I like it.
I'm
On
trying to
that,
figure out a way to limit the term, and
Yeah.
that's the only way that it seemed fair, but I
I
understand
mean,
what you're
to
saying.
Nathan's point, I'd almost rather, if we had to shift from the 50-50, I'd almost go the opposite, where we would collect more and they could collect it for a much longer period of time because our needs are so great. But,
Let's not muddy the waters too much.
well, I mean, if you're amenable to that idea, I don't have what the rest of you feel, but I'd be fine with the 50-50 for the 20 years. And then for the next 5 years, it goes to 35 them, 65 us. And from that point on, would reduce, as Sherry recommended.
90.
And I agree with you. I really think that you'll be close to getting it in the 20 with inflation, et cetera. But if we go beyond the 25, then it would go to 10 for the duration.
I think that's okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
You got all those notes down there, Mr. Attorney?
So,
I think
for
I
20
can-
years, 65 for the
5
next
more.
5 years, and then 90.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. It's a pretty good deal.
I think I can probably make that one, and you can.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I'll motion to approve resolution number R46-2024, approving a sales tax incentive agreement between Herriman City and Elevated Acquisitions LLC, with the change made to the section regarding the percentage and duration of the incentive being a maximum of 20 years at 50% each. From 20 to 25 years, for that next 5 years, the elevated incentive reduces to 35%. The city incentive, the city's portion increases to 65%. Beyond 25 years of the agreement, elevated's incentive reduces to 10% for the duration of the agreement, or the max, or the dollar amount identified, whichever comes first.
I have a motion on the table. It's a powerful motion.
Second.
Second by Steve. Okay.
You didn't even pawn that off on the attorney to fix.
Nope.
That was a good job,
Okay,
Jerry.
we'll do a vote.
Well,
Steve.
I did with the section and where it goes, and like, those are the details.
Okay, Steve,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. So that motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for working through this with us. I hope, we're excited. Just, we wanted to make sure we got it right, of course, and so.
And the reality is, normally, this would have been a work meeting process. But one of the things we've talked about with our staff is to have these discussions in our general meeting, so the public sees our decision-making process as part of it all in one meeting, so it's not spread out. So it saved you an extra meeting, but you had to stay here longer. So thank you for your patience.
Yep, we're excited, can't wait. So, and Matt, thank you for your help. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. We're really actually excited to have good development partners with us here today, so thank you for all you do.
Feels good. Okay.
All right, now go move some dirt. Let's go.
Yes. I love it. Okay. 11.4, consideration of an impact fee reimbursement agreement with Rosecrest communities to reimburse for costs incurred to construct infrastructure improvements associated with Rosecrest development.
All right, one more. Putting the staff reports together was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done, trying to keep everything straight. So, okay, Rosecrest. This is the companion agreement to the participation agreement that was approved earlier tonight. So this is the area that's left for collection because the South Hills and Panorama PIDs were approved. So this is the area that's highlighted on the map that will still generate impact fee. Everything else will not anymore in that area. So this one, as we stated earlier, all the work's been completed. There's no additional work anticipated. The impact fees estimated to be collected in this area are a little over $6 million. You can see the breakdown for transportation, water, and storm drain. That includes the most recently approved layout for the site. It's Pod 7 on Panorama with the commercial and the residential, and then the rest of it is Academy Village. And Academy Village has some that's been paid already and already been spent out to reimburse Wasatch on some of their projects and Rosecrest. So here are the eligible improvements. And this list was the same as the participation agreement minus the sewer, because sewer is not an eligible impact fee improvement for Herriman. It is for the sewer district, though. So here's the summary. You can see these are the items that are included. So if you add these up, and in the bottom right-hand side of the agreement, if you take the total, it's more than the total amount eligible for reimbursement because there's been some reimbursement done with CDA dollars, a mix. So this is where I was mentioning earlier, if we get additional CDA funds, we can reimburse our impact fee funds that we've already spent to make those funds whole. So with that, this one cleans up some old agreements. There were like 3 old agreements that really were messy, and these ones identify the specific projects, have verified amounts, void those previous agreements, and this one works in conjunction, so there's a total aggregate amount.
Then this will,
Finish it.
well, this will make it so that different parties can't argue over which of those former agreements we need to refer to.
To the
This
agreements.
cleans it
were
all
on
up, and
napkins.
Wasatch has been paid out on theirs.
Yeah, and
Yeah, too.
and I think with,
That's good.
if I might, one of the things that Blake is pointing out, if we'd like to use the CDA funds wherever possible, because then that gives us the ability to use the impact fees in other spots. We'll credit them, but as we go back.
That's what I was saying is the CDA funds are general fund stuff, right?
They're
I mean, within
limited to
within
that
CDA,
area.
right, but we have great flexibility over the CDA funds, but the impact fees are restricted for each one of those separate sections, so.
Correct.
Having a surplus in the CDA funds help us reimburse other impact fees or do other things we need to do with it or whatever. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Okay, any questions?
I'm slow, but I get there.
Nope.
No, you wanted to make a motion?
I'll look for a motion. Yep.
Motion to approve a reimbursement agreement with Rosecrest Communities to reimburse for costs incurred to construct infrastructure improvements.
Motion by Sherry,
Second.
second by Steve. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy's back online, so we'll go to Teddy.
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. I don't know what you're getting excited about. Okay, 11.5, consideration for adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance of and sale of not more than $20 million aggregate principal amount of sales and franchise tax revenue bonds and related matters. Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologize, I have to follow all that. Hopefully this will be fairly straightforward. So with the 25-26 budget, it included a number of items that were proposed to be financed with bond proceeds. Just as a reminder, and especially for public consumption, all these items arose from master development agreements and reimbursement agreements that the city is contractually obligated to complete. So these aren't just projects that the city came up with that they want to do. We are required by agreement to do them. So I've listed there the MDAs that are applicable, or the areas. So it totals 9 projects that will need to be done soon. They total $29.4 million. Working with our financial advisor, we are proposing splitting these projects into 2 bonds. The reason for that is we want to try to time the bond issuance to close when the projects will actually be started and completed, so we don't run into an issue, what's called arbitrage. I will leave arbitrage for another day.
Come on.
It's a nasty IRS term, and it's plaguing my life with one of our bonds right now. So this is a list of the projects. The projects with the asterisk next to them are proposed to be included in the first bond. We are still working through the process of working with our development partners. A lot of these are going to be completed by them. This is our best guess with the information we have right now. So exactly what you are approving tonight is what's called a parameters resolution. What this does is it sets all the maximums for when the bonds are issued. You have done these before, but it's been a number of years. So one is maximum principal. So we do set these numbers high. So for example, maximum principal currently is set at 20 million. However, the first bond we are only expecting to be around 17 million. A number of years to maturity. The resolution has 30. We were only planning on issuing 20-year bonds. One reason for this is if for some reason, because of market timing, it needs to be 21 years or 20 years and 3 months. If we don't have that flexibility, we would have to start the whole process all over again. And this will take months to issue these bonds. Sell price compared to principal at 98%. The reason for that is because of premiums and discounts that might be offered, and that really all is driven by market timing. And then a maximum interest rate of 6%. We, right now with the market, are expecting an interest rate of 4 or 5%, but this will allow us to go up to 6. One of the more important things that this will do is set what are called designated officers that can perform certain functions with selling the bonds. So that's selecting the bond underwriter, approving the method of sale, whether that's a competitive purchase where we go out to the public market versus a direct placement where a financial advisor and underwriter would negotiate a sale with, for example, a bank or another entity. Principal amounts, interest rate, terms, et cetera. And then if there's any minor error corrections or omissions that come up, this designated officer can fix those. So right now, the parameters resolution has the mayor, city manager, interim city manager, or finance director being those officers. And with that, are there any questions?
Are these designated officers able to act individually or in aggregate?
It is set to be individual currently.
Then the only objection I would have is that the mayor included as the individual to be able to do that. I think if it's an elected legislative office, that needs to be a council as a whole decision.
Okay.
I'm okay with the city manager and the finance director and their roles running the city to do that. I'm not necessarily comfortable having any one of us individually being assigned to do that.
Okay. If you can in your resolution, just remove them from being a designated officer.
You're saying the council as a whole?
No, he's just saying remove the mayor.
I just don't want to put you individually as the one authorized to negotiate the issues of a bond and
Right.
the terms and all that stuff in your role as the mayor.
Right. Neither do I.
I didn't think so.
Okay.
And now I'm not sure if that's just limiting it to basically that would be you two, is it? But
I agree with that, though, for the reasons that you stated.
and that's not a dig at the mayor at all. I just am.
Typically, that's, depending on your form of government, that wouldn't be unusual to just have your appointed staff.
Yeah. that's your roles as professionals to review and make those decisions. I don't think you would make it independently without, and vice versa, right? So I think there's two sets of eyes that are gonna review those and make a decision under these parameters. So that's where I'm comfortable with that.
There
So
can be. I mean,
Can be, yeah.
He could do it himself, and he could do it himself.
He could.
So do you want them
Right,
to tie it together?
but they are accountable to the council.
Right.
No, yeah, that's-
And the city manager is, I am his subordinate, so I naturally wouldn't do anything. But you could also, if you want, in your motion, you could also say both of us have to agree. You could add that if you wanted that additional protection,
That
but.
would be a good idea. Is that normally how you would see it?
I've not seen it that way, but the reality is, we're gonna talk about it anyway, so if you do it, it's totally fine, because that's how it's going to work in
Seems like it's
practice.
just good practice to have them, that two people have to be together and not.
I don't think it's necessarily controls or risk issue because they're not handling the money, they can't benefit from it, et cetera. But at least, I mean, from a practice point of view, two sets of eyes on it before
Yeah.
it's done, not a bad idea.
Yep.
All right, who's making that motion?
Okay, Steve,
I've
that's
been a
your
real
motion.
grinder tonight. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's good.
I was
It's a good
thinking,
catch,
though,
too.
that the time that was spent a few minutes ago on the MDA are all lessons learned by all these
Yes.
dogs
Yeah,
on here.
exactly.
You feel bad for some of these people that come in and are.
I'm just like, yeah, but see all these dots on here? This
No,
is
no,
like the
I don't
lessons
feel bad
learned.
for him at all, Mayor, because I've done this for
I know.
a number of years and been burned way too many times. They should feel bad for me.
But I think, Jared, to your point, our job in these negotiations isn't to make friends necessarily. I'm not saying we're trying to be antagonistic.
Right.
But our job is to make sure that we're dotting all those i's, crossing all those t's, and evaluating all that. So in that role, during that time, I think we acted very much in harmony with that, so.
Okay, we're getting off. Let's go back and do a motion, Steve, since you.
I will, but I want to make one comment. This is a total, we're talking about an initial bond of 20-ish, and then another one that's going to have to come after, right, for the rest of it?
So, correct. So the first bond will be around 17 million. The second would be around 12.
Yeah.
The second one, of course, we will have additional information. We will have more refined costs. So the hope is that number will go down, but I can't promise
And hopefully
anything.
interest rates will
I just want to put together that the $30 million obligation that the city of Herriman has at this point is due to the fact that there were agreements that were made that based on impact fees that aren't enough, and then there was backed up by additional funds that weren't enough, that put it on the hook that now, when, chickens come home to roost, we have to bond to pay the rest of it off. And that's why the PIDs are a superior option to the impact fees, because we won't have to bond down the road for that infrastructure.
Sure.
Well, I know you want to move
The
on,
whole
Mayor,
city
but-
doesn't go on the hook for that.
But to add to Steve's point, the wording of those agreements is what's gotten us into trouble in the past. The loose wording, and like I pointed out, the next person sitting there is going to say, well, it doesn't say that.
Or lack of participation agreements.
Even though that's what was discussed, so the time that we spent doing this is well worth it.
100%.
And yes, we're just doing our job as stewards of the
Yeah,
public purse.
because we have done MDAs in the more recent future that didn't necessarily have a PID, but we also didn't put ourselves on the hook to reimburse the total cost. We only put ourselves on the hook to reimburse what was collected. Where a lot of these where we were on the hook to reimburse the whole cost, regardless of what
was
we collected.
Yeah.
So we've learned good lessons. Yep.
Yeah, it's a $30 million lesson.
Sure.
All right, thanks, guys. This is long.
Good. Had a good night.
Motion to approve resolution number R47-2024, authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than $20 million aggregate principal amount of sales and franchise tax revenue bonds, Series 2025, the Series 2025 bonds. Fixing the maximum aggregate principal amount of the Series 2025 bonds, the maximum number of years over which the Series 2025 bonds may mature, the maximum interest rate at which the Series 2025 bonds may bear, and the maximum discount from par at which the Series 2025 bonds may be sold. delegating to certain officers, the city manager and finance director in agreement with each other, the authority to approve the final terms and provisions of the Series 2025 bonds within the parameters set forth herein, authorizing the publication of a notice of public hearing and bonds to be issued, providing for the running of a contest period and setting of a public hearing, authorizing and approving a supplemental indenture, a bond purchase contract, and other documents required in connection therewith, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this resolution and related matters.
Second.
Motion by Steve, second by Jared. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I vote yes.
That is the longest motion.
Motion.
The bond council attorneys got their money tonight.
Yeah, no kidding.
My goodness.
Right. Okay, that brings us to the close of our meeting tonight. Future meetings, next planning commission meeting on the 18th of December. Our next meeting is not until the 8th of January. Events, Saturday morning at 10 a.m. is the Wreaths Across America here at our cemetery. City offices are closed the 24th and 25th and January 1st. With that, I will look for a motion to, anybody got the close? We got to go back to close. Anybody got that sheet? You got it, Steve? Okay.
Make a motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to go into closed meeting for the following purpose as provided in Utah State Code annotated section 52-4-205, strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, or to discuss a proposed development agreement, project proposal, or financing proposal related to the development of land owned by the city.
Okay. Motion by Steve, second by Sherry. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes. We will move into close. We'll go back into Fort Herriman. We need, who do we need? City
All the regular
manager,
people.
Wendy,
Blake and Michael.
Blake, Michael, not Kyle. Kyle's good. Kyle's off. Okay. Probably Todd.
And Chief.
We don't need chief, right?
Probably Todd.